Good evening and welcome to the June 10th, 2025 Special Hybrid Planning Commission meeting. I'm Chair Dan Thompson. Tonight's Special Hybrid Planning Commission meeting is being brought to you by Zoom. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Thompson or Chair Thompson,
Here.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Here.
Commissioner Hughes. Here. Commissioner Neese. I know that there was a possibility he wasn't going to be able to join us. And Commissioner Perez.
Here.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission meets in person and utilizes the Zoom platform for. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you may then ask your question. Our first item of business is public appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the commission about issues of concern, except items requiring a public hearing, any quasi-judicial matters, or campaign-related matters. I will note that there are two public hearings related to the, no, is there one?
There's one.
There's one public hearing related to permanent regulations for temporary use ordinances and structures, including outdoor dining. And ask that you hold your comments if they pertain to that hearing. Deputy Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for public appearances as of 4 p.m. today who wishes to address the commission?
Yes, sir.
All
Excuse me. No, there are not.
All right. Well, thank you. Tonight's agenda will include, well, there won't be any meetings. Well, since there are no further appearances, we'll now move to regular business. The first item of regular business is to review PCB 25-12, public hearing on permanent regulations for temporary uses and structures, including outdoor dining. Second reading. Well, I better go back and do the minutes. I'm sorry. The first item is to review and consider approving the May 28th meeting minutes. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion by Commissioner Gibson and a second by Commissioner Perez to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, Deputy Clerk, please conduct a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes. Aye. Chair Thompson
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you.
The motion passes 4-0. The second item of regular business is Agenda Bill PCB 25-12, public hearing on permit regulations for temporary uses and structures, including outdoor dining, second reading. The public hearing is to receive public comments on the proposed permanent regulations for temporary uses and structures, including outdoor dining. Individuals wishing to make a public comment on this agenda may do so in person or by Zoom at this time. The public hearing is now open as of 6:07 p.m. Deputy Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for public comment who wishes to address the commission?
No, Chair, there's no one that has signed up, nor is there anybody in the room that has arrived to speak. So
If there is no further testimony, the public portion of this hearing is now closed as of 6:07 p.m. Thank you. The public portion of this hearing is now closed as of 6:07 p.m. The next item of regular business is Planning Commission Agenda Item PZP 25-12, permanent regulations for temporary uses and structures, including outdoor dining. Does staff wish to make any presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
There we go.
Okay. Who's still on? No. All right, so yeah. You good now? Yeah, now, okay, we're good now, right? No, I go, okay. Okay, the purpose of this meeting is to hold a public hearing for temporary uses and structures, hold deliberations and get potential recommendations. Deliberations and the recommendation can be continued to the next regular meeting on July 22nd, which I expect will be needed. So the process, I'll start with a presentation highlighting some of the key points found in the PCD, and then we'll move on to deliberations. So once we get through the minor amendments, we can discuss the questions that were posed ahead of the March meeting for the temporary uses section. These are the 12 questions that if we can get consensus on, staff can come up with a draft, with a revised draft that we feel can answer all of the planning commission's goals with the proposed amendments. So we won't necessarily need to go through each individual log number for the temporary uses section for time's sake. But if there are proposed amendments in the log numbers that are listed in the matrix that you want to discuss or make a motion to recommend, then that's okay. We can do that as well. So we'll get into the presentation and I can pause for questions after each slide to make sure those are answered. But first we'll talk about zoning and land uses. So there are 13 zoning designations on the island, and those zones determine what land uses are allowed. Land uses can be categorized into 3 different types. That's uses that are permitted outright, uses that are permitted only through the authorization of a conditional use permit, and uses that are prohibited. Any use really falls into one of those 3 categories. So uses that are permitted outright typically still require some kind of land use authorization to regulate the development and to make sure aspects of the development comply with the standards set out in the code, unless specifically exempted from a permit requirement. All land use permits fall into one of the permit types listed in the land use review type section and are reviewed using the procedures outlined in the code. So conditional uses are those uses that are allowed in a zone but are subject to additional conditions, which are usually established to mitigate anticipated impacts. For example, a government service obtains a conditional use permit to operate in a single-family residential zone and demonstrates the additional conditions are met to the satisfaction of the hearing examiner. The use is permitted and the government service is allowed to operate just like any other outright permitted use. Prohibited uses are self-explanatory, so I won't get into those, but you might see some places in the code where a use that's not listed is prohibited. The city does not have an existing process to authorize a use that does not meet the development code. So even a use that obtains a variance for a dimensional standard is permitted and is not necessarily illegally nonconforming. As I mentioned, each of our permit types are outlined in the code and each type is subject to different review procedures. So generally type 4 reviews take up the most staff time and resources, especially with the addition of the public hearing and decision made by usually the hearing examiner. The higher permit type usually means that there's more cost associated with the review, so the permit fees are pretty high. A type 4 permit fee on average is around $20,000, with the preliminary long plat being the largest fee. And then just as a reference, a conditional use permit is around $18,000. Hearing examiner services are around 3,500. And then an average type 3 permit fee is around 8,000. Type 2 is 3,000. And type 1 is around 1,000 with the hourly staff rate of $176. Do we have any questions? Sorry, I didn't pause for questions on the first one. Do we have questions for land use review types or the other one? No?
There was one item that you mentioned, a few minutes ago having to do with, the way that you interpret the first part of the code. So if you can go, I'm sorry, can you go to the next slide, please?
This-
It was just part of what you were reading was not making sense to me at that particular point. So, I'm sorry. I'll see if I can catch to the specificity at a later time.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for asking though for questions.
Okay, so non-conforming structures, sites, lots, and uses. A non-conformity is when a structure, site, lot, or use does not meet the standards established in the current code. There's two types of non-conformities, legal and illegal. Legal nonconformities are specifically defined in the code and must meet certain criteria in order to be considered legal. So that's structures, sites, and uses that lawfully existed prior to September 26, 1960, or those that conform to the standards in place at the time of their creation, but are not in compliance with the current code. So this can happen really anytime that there is a code change. Since we've talked a little bit about conditional use permits, I'll stick with that example. If a conditional use permit is authorized, the structure or use conforms to the applicable code requirements at the time the conditional use permit is granted, which would make the conditional use permit conforming at the time that it's authorized. The conditional use permit would only become non-conforming if regulations are amended to those that the use is no longer conforms to. So setbacks, height, lot coverage, or even the use itself. I won't spend too much time on illegal nonconformities, but if the structure or site or use does not meet the definition of a legal nonconformity, it must be brought into compliance with the current code. And the code has a mechanism for requiring that. You have questions on that one? Next topic is variances. These are available to any applicant or property owner to request to vary from a numeric standard in the code with the exception of those in the environmental chapter. The criteria is in this section is construed extremely narrowly, and the first criteria is generally the most difficult for residential properties to meet since they must demonstrate that the code imposes an unnecessary hardship, which is limited to those circumstances where the code prevents the construction of a single family residence. So it's really hard to demonstrate, and there have not been very many variances granted on residential lots in the last 5 years. Non-residential uses located in the residential zones are generally not eligible for a variance based on this provision and an administrative interpretation.
Could I just ask a question? I emailed it earlier and I just want to clarify. There was an administrative interpretation in 2022, 22-004 that said a conditional use in the residential zone couldn't apply for a variance. And then we have this hardship standard. So when I look at the draft we have now of the temporary use ordinance, if we apply the variance standard or procedures, that would pretty much preclude any non-conforming structure in the residential zone, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think, any non-residential use in the residential zone would not be able to apply for a variance. And so if they were trying to do a temporary use that needed a variance, that would not be possible.
Thank you.
So deviations are different from variances, and we do still allow for deviations in the code specifically for the protection of critical areas. But the definition, which is shown here, is pretty broad and could be applied to other cases. So since variances require special circumstances and are only granted under extremely limited circumstances, deviations allow for a little more flexibility in setting criteria that the development must meet in order to be granted a deviation without the special circumstance requirement. Whereas variances, again, are pretty difficult to meet that variance criteria.
Sorry to ask again, is a deviation available in the residential zone from the regulatory limits?
It's available for setbacks for the protection of critical areas in the residential zones, yes.
But that's the only regulatory limit?
Yes.
Thank you.
And one last thing about commerce on public property, and then we can jump into deliberation. So public property and public right-of-way are defined differently in the code. While right-of-way is public property, the right-of-way is specific to streets, sidewalks, and utility lines. Public property is a lot more broad and includes things like public parks and whole parcels owned by the city and also the right-of-way. So the section, yes, is titled Commerce on Public Property, but one of the later provisions specifies that this is for commerce on streets, sidewalks, and public right-of-way. So use of the right-of-way is regulated through right-of-way use permits, and the primary concern for the Public Works Department is the safe use of the right-of-way. If certain activities or durations of commerce on public property are exempted from a permit, the city engineer would not know if the criteria for approval listed in that section has been met unless there was a complaint filed or a safety concern or the city notices a violation. So commerce on public right-of-way includes a sidewalk sale, but can also be much larger in scale and includes street closures for short-term events, which the city engineer would need to review for alternative traffic routes and make sure emergency vehicle access is provided. And then last piece to touch on is summer celebration and the reason for the exemption from the provisions of this section, which is due to the first criteria of approval in the commerce on public property section, which requires the commerce activity to have an active business license at a location immediately adjacent to the proposed location. So this would potentially prohibit certain portions of summer celebration as it has historically operated if it was subject to these criteria. So that's why that call out is in the commerce on public property section for summer celebration. Questions on that one? Okay, so the process for deliberations, in a second here, I'll show the main motion on the screen, followed by the secondary motion to recommend the adoption of the minor amendments. One note in the minor amendments, I think it was log 20 that Commissioner Neese had an amendment to. So I believe we would want to pull that one from the minor amendment list potentially. And let's see. And then I will get into the questions and we can go line by line through the commerce on public property section.
Can you go back and leave that up? I didn't find that many. I just want to mark on the matrix, but you have it's kind of slow. I was pointing out I've got 55 pages here of amendments.
It's a big one.
So that's 17. Holy smokes. Oh, can you go back?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I still have
Didn't realize that was changing it.
So 20, 21, 22, and 24. Thank you.
So commissioners, as we enter into deliberations, I just want to remind everyone to please use your microphone. I can also work with it over here, but if we team up, we're more apt to make sure that all of you are being heard. So, thank you.
So Allison, are you wanting us to just move into a main motion for approval of the minor amendments?
I think a main motion to approve the recommendation, and then we'll move into approving the minor amendments. Once that's done, we can discuss the more overarching questions that Molly prepared to give feedback on some of the bigger issues within the amendment. Staff team can use that to redraft things for the next meeting. And then if we want to get into the commerce on public property section, that's where we can go line by line and look at the logged proposals.
All right. I'm not sure I'm entirely clear. So does anybody have a motion to approve the recommendation to? Oh, okay.
It's on the screen there.
Commissioner Hughes.
I'd like to move to recommend that the city council adopt the proposed amendments to MICC 1906-050, Commerce on Public Property as amended, proposed new section MICC 1906-130, temporary use permits as amended, and proposed amendments to MICC 1915-030, land use review types as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have the main motion made by Commissioner Hughes and seconded by Commissioner Gibson. Any questions for staff?
Just one quick clarification. So the baseline kind of starting point for these motions is the exhibit that was in our prep material. Okay, so any changes from here would be modifying the language that's already on this. Got it.
Correct, yeah.
Should I now make a sub motion or ask for a sub motion to approve the minor amendments?
That's correct. Molly just put a draft on the screen.
Commissioners, do we have a motion to approve minor amendments log number 1, 10, 17, 20, 21, 22, and 24? Or was one of those pulled?
So Commissioner Neese proposed making an amendment to log 20. So if you'd like to pull that for further discussion, that could be done now.
All right, do we have a motion then to approve minor amendments 1, 10, 17, 21, 22, and 24?
So second.
All right, Commissioner Gibson has moved to approve minor amendments 1, 10, 17, 21, 22, and 24. And Commissioner Hughes has seconded that. Is there any questions or discussion by the commission? I think the commission might just want 1 minute just to make sure that we go through and understand.
Let me know if there's anything I can share on the screen if you would, if that's helpful.
Anybody need more time to make sure that they've read each of the minor amendments and understand them?
No.
Anybody have any questions for staff or on any of the minor amendments? Deputy Clerk, could you call the roll on the motion?
For purposes of clarification, Chair, are we calling the roll call on the main motion or your secondary motion?
The secondary motion to approve the minor amendments 110, 17, 21, 22, and 24.
Thank you. Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, now we're back to the main motion. And should we start with some discussion or do you want to dive into the proposed ordinance itself? I know that on the Parks Commission, when we did it, we actually didn't work off the matrix. We worked off the draft ordinance, which makes it a little bit easier to see the variance. Some are staff suggested and some are not. Is that okay or?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Molly, you put together some kind of buckets of grouped logs that, this is your email from March, but it was bucketed into exemptions, normal temporary uses, and temporary use deviations. Those seem, if we can get consensus on the overarching topics, would be able to wipe large swaths of log items off the list. And so, and those seem to set the framework for the rest of how this is written. So I would propose we kind of go through those as the overarching items first, and then circle back through anything that is not picked up through those discussions.
It sounds good. I'm kind of confused though. So I don't know what's in these buckets. What log items are in the buckets?
Chair, Molly has a few slides to go over that if you want to give her the floor.
Oh, fantastic.
All right, so I can read each of these questions if that's helpful, or if you want to discuss, and if we get, like Commissioner Gibson said, if we get consensus on the answers to these questions, staff has a pretty good idea of where we can revise the draft to get to a more finalized version at the next meeting. So the related logs to these questions are listed below. And if there's any specific ones that you want to pull out and discuss on their own, we can do that. But the answers to those the answers to this question really resolves kind of those log numbers.
So we have a 19A and a 19B.
Yeah, so the A's and B's are just alternatives. So you would likely want to pick one or the other, or the answer to the large question would give staff direction to answer those for you, essentially, or draft for you.
Thanks.
As we go into this, are all of these questions specifically towards the MICC 1906-130 for the town?
Yes, yeah, we are not, the questions do not address any of the public commerce on public property section, so 1906-050.
Got it. Thank you.
And I was just going to say, thank you very much for doing it in this format with the log A, log B. I think that just kind of covers the breadth of a lot of material in a short amount of time and gives us a concise language to start the negotiation. So thank you.
Shall we just start on log 19? I think we have to, give some clarity since there's two proposals. Commissioner Gibson, can you explain your 19A proposed amendment?
Yes. So this is somewhat related to a separate amendment. I think generally there's an exemption that I proposed that allows temporary uses without a permit if the duration is less than a certain time period. And in large part, this is more so under just a practicality piece of if somebody wants to put a tent in their front driveway, that's up for, I think I proposed 7 days or less. Do they really need to go through the city to get a permit? Same would go for if you're having a graduation party and you want a food truck in your driveway, do you really need to go to the city for a permit for that? So I was proposing an exemption that, is a very short time frame. And would allow somebody to, put up a tent of any sort. The log 19A proposed amendment was taking that into consideration as if that broader exemption was approved, then, a garage sale lasting less than a week would be allowed and we wouldn't even need this exemption in the first place.
And so the section you referenced, E1K, that limits it to 7 days. Because I like the motion and I like the concept and saying that we have some exemptions for these things that have never gotten a permit before, as long as there's a time limit on it. And I can't just remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah, if you give me a second to find out where that landed in this, I can just jump to that one.
Do you know, Molly, is there this E1K, is that the provision that limits it to 7 days?
So E, I believe, is the general criteria for approval or for the exemptions or permits that are exempt from the permit. One thing to clarify though, in this process, if we were to answer this question, the what types of temporary uses should be exempt from obtaining a temporary use permit or going through that, we could then list out those as exempt from needing a permit without you having to go through logs 20, 21, 22 individually. 19, I think, kind of overarches also into the next question, which is kind of has to do with duration and time limits.
Yeah, that's my only
Okay.
question. Is there a time limit on these? I don't want somebody to put up a tent for 6 months. If I remember correctly, these are exempt, but they were limited to 1 week. Is that, I think that's correct.
I think it was 7 days, yeah.
All right.
But so with this question, we're really looking to identify, well, what are the types of uses that might be exempt, either under a certain duration or just generally? And, maybe there's a category that's like things that are not a big deal, like a garage sale or a 1-day party or something like that.
Well, what about the list in Commissioner Neese's 19B? Those three.
Mhm.
I mean, do we want to put in lemonade stands and garage sale, yard sale, estate sale, lemonade stand?
Yeah, I don't think we need an exhaustive list right now, but just give us the
Uh,
general sense of the types of things we're thinking of
Weddings.
or not thinking of.
You know, I think that we talked about weddings, you know, a tent for a wedding.
I think the part of the rationale for that at least I went through on this was if it's something that is only set up for 7 days, just from a practicality standpoint, nobody's gonna put up a 200-foot, whatever, structure that they're just gonna tear down right away. And if it is up and it's only up for 7 days, then
Well, that makes good sense. Commissioner Hughes?
Yeah, I'm looking at log 23, and I think this was yours, JB, or sorry, Commissioner Gibson. Any temporary use or structure with a term of less than 1 week in any given 3-month period, the underlying development standards of the zoning designation applicable to the site on which the temporary use or structure is proposed do not apply. So that would
Thank you
cover
for finding
a
that.
lemonade stand, a wedding,
Mhm.
all kinds of things that are just very short in duration. So to answer your question, I think we kind of did with that list. We want, you know, if, I think we're in general agreement here, maybe we don't do thumbs up votes anymore, do we? No, Deb's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. i- If there's if folks agree that D is there's general agreement, I think that you have your answer.
Yeah,
So-
I guess we were looking, yeah, to see if there were anything in addition to garage sales, yard sales, estate sales, rummage sales. And it sounds like the 7-day duration is,
Yeah, you know, from Commissioner Gibson and Commissioner Neese, it's almost like they're sitting there saying is if you have a time limit and you have a size limit, getting every possible use isn't that big of an issue. So if we do the 120 foot and the 7-day, you know, I guess we could throw a few things in there and then put some catch-all and other temporary uses. Wouldn't that be enough?
So the 120-foot is the limit on size for tents.
Or the structure?
yeah, so there's two kind of proposed, there's 19A and 19B. My proposed was to eliminate the 120 square foot limit and just, you know, not really have a limit for that. And then Commissioner Neese's, which I assume is 19B, was increasing the tent square footage from 120 to 2,000. So
2,000.
No, it's 1 tent per 2,000 square
yeah.
feet of lot.
oh, sorry.
But that's
Or two
still, I mean,
tenths.
that's on a south end lot, they're 15,000 square feet. You know, Nazim lives on Capitol Hill, so that's divide that, that's seven times 120. You're talking 1,000 square foot tent up for a week. I mean, that would be a lot in the summer. I think that there needs to be, I like the week. And I like either 120 feet, square feet or 2 tents, so 240 limit. I just, you know, we can't just leave it where somebody for a week next to your house puts up an unlimited size temporary structure. That's too much.
I think, you know, if somebody had a wedding, I don't know if it's on their driveway, this could be in their backyard too, right? Not just the front. So if they had a big wedding tent, that's likely much larger than 120 square feet. And so again, if it's only up for a week and it's in somebody's backyard for a wedding event, I don't think that there'd be huge objections to that.
I think you're probably right. I mean, I've had graduation parties and weddings and stuff on houses. I don't think too many people would abuse it, and I don't think there's too many tents that are more than 10 feet tall. So what do you think, Commissioner Hughes?
Well, since you asked. Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree that the size makes sense because of the large parties that people tend to have. But I also agree that you wouldn't want to necessarily have your neighbors have like 7 tents on your lawn, but it's only for a week.
Um,
And then the proposed, so log 23 is 1 week in a given 3-month period, so that they couldn't do it every weekend for set it up, take it down, set it up, take it down. So it prevents some of that action.
well, we could use Commissioner Nice's size limit, 1 tent for 2,000 square feet of lot, which is a lot, but it's not unlimited. And the 1 week in any 3 months that you have in log 23. What do you think about that?
So to clarify, you'd accept log 19B and log 23 together?
I think so. It,
Yeah.
it gives quite a bit of flexibility, but not unlimited,
I agree with that.
and for 1 week. How about you, Commissioner Perez?
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of navigate between the two. I think, the only issue is a maximum of 1 tent per 2,000 square foot. Doesn't indicate the amount of the limit on the amount of size, but knowing practically that any sort of event, they're not going to have up for a week because they're paying every single day. And I can't imagine if somebody in a 2,000 square foot lot would put a 1,000 square foot tent up. So, just trying to think those things through. I'm okay with this in terms of a general provision. I like the limitation tied to the lot area, and then the 7 days. I'm comfortable at this point.
Can I add one?
Yes,
nuance to
please.
that?
Jack Hughes?
Would temporary housing be allowed under this? Because the one thing that made me uncomfortable was it says any on log 23, any temporary use or structure. And that to me could suggest that someone could park their RV for 7 days in front of their house, or their friends could, they could basically have a little quarterly campsite.
So the purpose and applicability section says that temporary encampments are not considered temporary uses. For the
Okay, thank you
purposes
so
of this
much.
section.
And
Yeah, I
I'm pretty
just
sure
wanted to double check
vehicles-
on that.
Vehicles are not a
Convenient.
structure as well.
Yeah.
So what does that sound okay? Molly, does that sound like it would work, the week, the Commissioner Nice's size limitations?
Yeah, I do want to clarify one thing, talking about the size of the tent. The full sentence is tents or other temporary structures used in conjunction with the yard sale or state sale shall not exceed 120 square feet with a maximum of 1 tent per. So it does have a max on the size of the tent, and then each 2,000 square feet of lot can have 1 tent, not to exceed 2 tents.
I see.
That's not how, it says whichever is greater.
It does.
Yeah, so it could be more than 2 tents if it's a large lot,
Yeah.
but each tent can only be 120 square feet. Right, so
Right.
I think you guys were talking about perhaps allowing larger tents.
I think so.
Larger tent.
Yeah. I think Commissioner Perez made the main point, as we all been at before, is once the event's over, you want that thing off your property as soon as you can. So do we need a size limit, on a temporary tent for 1 week?
We can go back
Does it matter if
we can
it's
go
in
back
the
to my
front or the
proposed
back?
one where we just strike it completely. And just let practicality rule.
Well, I like the 1 week. Those are all great points. I don't know that do we need a size limit? Do you think? I don't think so either. The
Can I
1
ask a
week?
question?
Yeah, sure.
Do we need to clarify front or back of the house? Is that a thing?
I mean, front yard and backyard is a thing, but it doesn't always mean exactly what you think it means, because some lots are complicated shapes.
This is also tents for garage sales and yard sales, which are most likely in the front yard.
I keep going back to Commissioner Perez. The 1 week is the limiting factor, and nobody's going to put up a huge tent for fun and take it down a week later. And if you're renting it and the event's over, just like he said, the rental company is going to come get it. So I think the 1 week, and I don't know what the language would be, but a lot of this maybe isn't necessary.
So with that in mind, can I go into a motion here?
Do you need a motion on something like this?
No, I think we're just looking for the type of general feedback you just gave. It looks
Right.
like you're all generally agreeing. We don't need a size limit on tents. We've got a list of the types of uses that could be permitted for short durations up to 7 days.
Okay,
And we can
great.
use that to craft a code section that specifies those things.
All right.
And that would basically just be accepting log 23 and 19A here, and then striking 19B, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm typing, I think she
Yeah.
is too.
Yeah.
We'll help you.
You know, I think Commissioner Gibson raises a point. Should there be a limit on how frequently you can put up a tent for a week? His 23 is pretty good in, a 3-month period.
Yeah, one clarification is the section that we were just talking about was specific for tents for yard sales and garage sales and things.
Oh.
But it sounds like there is consensus for allowing maybe tents for the maximum of 7-day duration, like in log 23, which I think log 23 was not specific to a specific use. So if we're good with 23, then that's okay. The second question here is, should a proposed use be exempt for the temporary use based on its duration or number of occurrences? So I think we answered that with log 23 as well. And then the third question here is, if duration or occurrences will be used to establish the exemption, what would that number be? So that's the 7 days over the 30-day period?
3 month, yeah.
Oh, 3-month period.
Yeah. 3-month period. It's not. Sure. All right, you have the direction? We have 1 week in every 3 months without a size limit?
Yep, I think we got bucket 1 resolved.
All right, love that. Bucket 2.
Yes.
How many buckets do we have?
3 buckets.
Oh, good one. Thank you.
Yes, so these are for your normal quote unquote temporary uses that would not require any additional criteria above and beyond the criteria set out in blanking on the section, but
So these would be conforming structures, right? The structure is going to be within the regulatory limits of the zone.
not necessarily. There is another question to follow that up, but these are for your like the ones that are not exempt, but the ones that don't require the additional criteria.
So they're longer than 7 days, but they're not necessarily an intensity that would require this more thorough review process.
Yeah, so I think 18A was my recommendation on this. I think the framework that I was going for was that, yes, beyond the 7 days, and then within the time limits that were set elsewhere in the code, and then if it did not require I think what we're kind of going towards is a deviation or any sort of, so it would conform to the underlying land use requirements.
Yeah, I mean, just so we understand, type 2 means that there's only notification in the permit bulletin.
Correct, yeah. So if it meets those criteria, then it would just be a type 2 review instead of a type 1.
I think I'm the only person on Mercer Island who reviews the permit bulletin, so that would kind of, the funny thing is it's a temporary, so if you missed it and you wanted to object, you could wait till it comes along. I just want to make sure that the type 2, I'm understanding what we're talking about here. We're talking about a temporary use that's more than the exempt, but it's within the regulatory limits.
Yeah, if,
That's my proposed, that's what I've been proposing. I think the example that was provided a while back was, I think the beach club's pool cover
Right.
is within the residential height and setbacks and so on. And so it would not require any sort of deviations, but it is up longer than that 7-day exemption. And therefore would just be a type 2 review.
Commissioner Ackies, what do you think?
I like the staff proposed
What-
alternative.
And that's log what?
It's 18B.
18B.
E as in dog.
Oh, dog.
It basically says temporary use and temporary use renewal application shall be processed as type 2. And temporary use deviation application shall be processed as type 4.
Yeah. The deviation is a loaded word. So.
And that's
That's-
the next bucket, right, Molly?
Yeah, so, yeah, I don't have, if it's something like the beach club, it's within the regulatory limits, that's a type 2. But the deviation is really a variance. I think that type 4, I've been thinking about this, is too much. Where you start off with a public hearing. And I talk to the people at the country club, they sit there and say, look, we'll go through it the first time. And, all the neighbors will get notice and they'll do it. And then maybe every 5 years or something. And then it's like a type 2 because just like we talked about, type 4 is pretty extreme. I mean, that's a conditional use permit and that is permanent. I mean, worst case scenario is if you really did not like that temporary use permit, you're going to have another chance probably to get involved and object to it, even if you have to watch the permit bulletin. So I don't think I'd go 4, to tell you the truth. And part of that is, and I've participated in some of the hearing examiner public hearings, and I don't think in a lot of ways he's as nuanced or understanding as city planning staff, certainly the current one. So I'd stay away from 4 myself on a temporary structure. What do you guys think?
So 2 and 3.
That's what I would do. Well, we really haven't got to, this deviation variance, and that's because, well, we'll do that. How about, let's agree on 2 if it meets the regulatory limits, but it's not exempt. Is that?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
And for renewals of things that had some type of deviation or variance, would they also fall in that type 2?
Yeah, I think so.
And we'll talk more about the deviation variance situation.
Right.
so the next question here is, what time limit or term should be set for a normal temporary use? Is it good for 1 year, 5 years, forever? Do they need to renew a normal one? Does it lapse when the use is done?
That's a good one, because it's called a temporary use. But then the country club's a good example because they wanted, some 20-year guarantee, which I think they might have been given, but they wanted a certain time period because of the cost of the structure the temporary structure that they were looking at. So Yeah, I mean, I think that there should be a renewal period, at some point, because sometimes, they get lax on their screening, their trees, their use, or people think that it's morphed or something like that. But what do you think, Commissioner Fred?
Well, the question in my mind is 1 year too short? To me, in perpetuity is far too long.
Right.
So doing this annually, sounds like a lot of paperwork, kind of going back and forth. To me, I'm leaning towards 5 years, but the reason I can lean towards 5 years has to do with the idea that, the intention is that there's an expiration built in if it's not renewed, at the end of that particular period. So that there's an expiration, so there's an incentive to stay on the good side of the intent of this code from the landowner point of view. So to me, I feel pretty comfortable with 5.
Well, I don't know how that's, I mean, so we're having a type 2 permit notice.
Yeah.
What if a neighbor, follows the permit bulletin and in year 2 or 3 submits a public comment objecting to it, becomes a party of record, comes in and says, I object. And then you're sitting there saying, well, it's been granted for, 5, 10, 15 years. That's, we have these competing things. There has to be some certainty if you're going to spend that kind of money. And then you do a type 3 and somebody misses it. I thought I saw somewhere in here, was it staff or somebody who recommended that it would be, type 3 for the first go around, at least for the non-conforming, and then type 2 for the next 5 years. But that doesn't really say, is it guaranteed?
Yeah, I think we had something like that for the height of the bucket 3 section, but for these normal ones, we're looking for that term. I will point out in the code currently, land use review approvals expire 3 years from the date of the notice of decision, if the development proposal authorized by the land use review has not commenced. So when after the activity, I think the permit itself would expire, if the activity has commenced, if that helps with, I think, Perez's question.
So just to switch it, I mean, if these are conforming temporary structures, that same property owner theoretically, if they were going to leave it up permanently, could go in and request a permanent structure, right? Because, they're within their regulatory limits. So for some reason, we're calling it a temporary, but they would have a right for it to be permanent. And they need some certainty on the investment. So, yeah, I think at least 5 years. What do you think, Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you, Chair. In my opinion, a 5-year renewal is pretty reasonable. County Parks has a really good track record of that with Soda Serve Our Dog Areas at Marymore Park and with the rowing club. And given those types of activities we like here on the island too, that makes sense. So they do have that 20 year in, or I think it's even 30 years in those 2 cases that I'm using as examples. So it might be nice for these normal ones to have a period, say they can be renewed on a 5-year basis up to a 20-year period. And then at 20 years, things have probably changed enough that it's time to revisit.
Commissioner Gibson?
So from what I remember, that the original draft had included 180-day temporary use duration, which aligns with the IBC. Is kind of what the standard temporary use duration is. I think 180 days for a temporary structure is fine. I would like to see it differentiate between in the town center and outside the town center. Inside the town center, I don't think, a time constraint is as critical, but outside the town center, hundred and eighty days seems appropriate, and then you could renew it annually. And
You know, as somebody who's keen on the residential zone, I agree with you. But they're gonna come in and sit there and say, I can't, tell my club to spend $1 million on this, temporary structure. I think what you would end up actually doing, if I were a planner, I'd sit there and say, well, if you don't want to renew this every year, build a permanent structure. You're within your regulatory limits. And then that doesn't help. I mean,
Right.
it's the same. So they have to be able to be guaranteed that their investment is going to pay off. But I also agree with Commissioner Perez. We're not granting this to them forever. It has to be some review. So let me ask you this. Say the beach club, we'll use that as a cover. If they have 5-year, 10-year, whatever we agree on, do they still have to do a type 2 permit renewal every year?
Well, we do, every time they erect the structure, we need to do an inspection for life safety issues. And so we need to have some kind of permit application at that point, whether it's a building permit or a temporary use. We need something to trigger the inspection.
My point is at least 5 years. But I could do the 5 years because they are making an investment. They are within the regulatory limits. If they wanted to, they could just apply for a permanent permit for the structure. So 5 years, is that enough?
again, I think we're only protecting against that there's a future code change that would all of a sudden make that structure non-conforming. And I think that's a scenario that's pretty far outside of likelihood. And if it, that's what your 5-year scenario would get you. Since it is conforming and it's a type 2 review, there's nothing really in the way of them getting it renewed annually. And the annual renewal process, to Allison's point, kicks in the inspection and those types of requirements that are needed for life safety.
So in year 6, would they then do another type 3?
Since they're conforming, they don't have to do a type 3 ever. If they're conforming,
All right, so.
it'd be a type 2 from the first application.
So I'm just kind of confused. So they're guaranteed for 5 years. They do the type 2 permit so the city can make sure that it's put up correctly. And then what happens at year 6? Does it just stay type 2? Is that what we're going to do?
Well,
That's what my suggestion was, to say that the type 2 is renewable for up to 5 years, or for up to 20 years. If you put that, do you have the
But if it's-
mechanism to?
if it's already conforming, you don't have to go through a type 3.
No, but she's saying type 2 renewal each year, but almost like a 20-year guarantee, right?
Yeah, so if they meet the requirements, because there's gonna be some sort of conditioning on the permit, then they can renew it for another 5 years, up to 20 years or 30 years.
Oh, I see.
Because then that allows some, reduces their risk for the $1 million investment. That's what, for the shell house on the Sammamish River. That was over $1 million, and they had a 30-year lease. It's a different set of circumstances, but the idea is the same, that you renew it every 5 years, but you can do that up to X amount of time, so they're more comfortable making the investment.
Yeah, I think that's a good thinking. I mean, I don't know how you can tell somebody who's wants a temporary use within the regulatory limits on their property, that all of a sudden, no, for some reason you got to year 5. No, but maybe it's not a bad idea that there's some, well, so what happens on year 5? If they have 20 years, you get to year 5, and is there a little heightened review or?
So would they have to reapply for a new permit rather than, like, I'm assuming the renewal will be a simplified application where they just confirm, yes, we're continuing the same thing we applied for previously. Everything's the same dimensions and uses. Whereas a new application, they might have to provide updated drawings and other materials.
Yeah, that's the difference. It's good to say, see application from X year,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not redoing all the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it
Which-
sounds like you've seen it, so how would you do this? How would you do it?
That was my question for staff was, I mean, I'm talking about a leasing mechanism. That's my example,
Yeah.
which isn't the same as a temporary use permit. Is there a mechanism whereby you could issue a 5-year type 2 permit that can be renewed up to 4 times, you know, to a 20-year period, or 6 times to a 30-year period?
I think that's feasible. We don't currently have any permits that work that way, but I think it could be set up that way in our system and it's feasible. I think annually they would still need to call in for an inspection when they set up the temporary structure, but that could be handled a different way. This would be the land use approval. And it would last for 5 years with the ability to renew.
And that could be a condition of the 5-year permit that they call in for the inspection. And then at
Yes.
5 years, if they want to renew it and they have not been calling the city for inspections, then the city can say, you haven't let us inspect your facility.
We
You've
have
been
no idea what's out
violating the
there.
terms of the permit. We're not going to give you another permit.
Or they're not doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Commission Hughes has kind of hit what I would like to do, so I'll agree with her. Commissioner Gibson?
I think the renewal process, I mean, I don't think going through a type 2 review and just doing that every year is necessarily any different. The only risk that they wouldn't get approved in year 2, 3, or 4 or beyond would be that if there's a code revision that now makes it so that that use is no longer conforming. And you know, I just don't think I don't think that's a scenario we need to protect against right now.
Allison, how burdensome and expensive is a type 2 permit for an applicant? Like
Molly
the
might be able
beach
to speak
club?
to that better than me because she actually reviews permits. It is some work to process it.
I mean, the beach clubs does it every year, right?
They do, yeah, and I presume they have a set of drawings that they probably resubmit, but you know, you need to pay a fee, you need to submit a set of documents. There's some city staff time involved with reviewing that and approving it and issuing it, so it's not like a 15-minute exercise, it's like a several hours exercise.
I'm Doge.
And if there's,
I
I
want to
mean,
reduce the regulatory burden for unnecessary, you know, there's a lot of permitting processes that are standard and it just ends up being boilerplate and, you know, you really question what is the value to the public. And so if we're trying to be efficient, we have a small staff that run a tight ship. I like the idea that folks can
Well, they must have to,
make a phone
Sub-
call and get their inspection and be done with it.
excuse me, somebody like the beach club, they must have to pay something and file something for the inspection, you know, the physical inspection, but that's not a type 2, that's not a land use permit, right?
Right, I think prior to the interim temporary use regulations that are now in place, they applied for some type of a simple building permit and then scheduled the inspection when the bubble was installed.
you know, I think from an efficiency standpoint, and I'm not sure if it actually belongs in the regulations, but it seems like there could be an expedited renewal process, provided that the code hasn't changed, and B, that the application hasn't changed. And then you could modify the fees and, you know, what the review process is, you know,
Well-
with those understandings, then you're speeding up the process. But that seems to me to be a process thing, not necessarily a regulation.
Do you want to just pull that one question out and we'll save it till the next meeting when Commissioner Neese here is, and that is all the framework sounds good to me. The question is whether the applicant has to do a type 2 every year. And
Yeah.
then we can have a vote on that.
Yeah, why don't we take a crack at drafting something and then you can further discuss it and revise as needed at the next meeting.
Sounds good. Next bucket.
Oh, answer that one. Okay. I think we have answered most of this one. Our normal temporary use is required to meet all the numerical standards for the underlying zone. I also would like to pose the question of the exemptions. Are the exemptions subject to the development standards for the underlying zone?
I wouldn't think so. Not if, if you're gonna count that as gross floor area, you couldn't probably put up a tent. I don't think anybody has, extra 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. So I'm not worried about that, but when we're talking about something that's gonna be up 3 to 6 months, my assumption is because we're probably gonna go to such a relaxed or more relaxed renewal permit that they meet all the numerical standards. I don't know if I want to get in and start saying which ones they wouldn't have to. What do you think, Commissioner Gibson?
Yeah, I think I agree.
Commissioner Hughes?
I was reading.
Commissioner Perez?
No, I agree. I agree. I think that let's not get into all the minutia.
All right.
Are there additional criteria or are there other types of normal temporary uses that you would like to see additional criteria of approval beyond what is already in the draft regulations?
And just for clarity as we go forward, are we talking about the town center or are we talking about the residential zone?
All private property right now. There has not been a differentiation between the two.
All right. Would somebody like to start on this? Well, I will just say that I distinguish them. I wouldn't see really any criteria or restrictions in the town center on any type of, use as long as it meets the use that is allowed in the town center. I sent out an email earlier. When I look at this, when it comes to the public property, I kind of defer to the city. I'm not too worried about them doing it. Private property, as long as it meets the uses, who's going to put up a temporary structure that tries to exceed the regulatory limits in the town center? It'd be too expensive and huge. But it's when this temporary use started to migrate into the residential and single family zone. I don't think people want food trucks for 6 months, parked on their neighbor's property or commerce. When we were talking about the exempt ones, we were talking 7 days. Those are the things to do it. But I think that's such a huge philosophical change in the code where we're now going to allow, not really temporary, we're talking like 6 months. That would be April till October, where somebody's got one of those loud food trucks like they have at Chevron. So I wouldn't want to see, I don't care in the town center. That's what it's there for, but I don't want to see these type of businesses in the residential zone. That's my thought. Anybody else?
Just a question. So the previous I'm sorry, the question that we just answered was that it had to meet the underlying zoning requirements. And so if you're a single family home, operating a food truck in this normal, greater than 7 days permit is not an allowable use in the residential code, I'm assuming, and then therefore would just not be allowed based on the previous answer, right?
I think that's true. home-based businesses are allowed in the residential zone, but there's pretty strict restrictions on what a home-based business is, the number of people that could work there. I think it's, someone has to live in the home and then maybe up to 2 additional people. I think it may even specify that it needs to be within the building. I don't, we'll have to look at that, but
Cause when it comes to, you know, having adverse uses for up to a 6-month period, to your point. I want to say that the underlying land use code maybe already addresses that. So if we require that the temporary use meet the underlying land use codes requirements, then
That's what I was thinking.
yeah.
Exactly.
So it may just naturally be correct without additional language here. If they defer to the land use code, the underlying land use code.
Does that make sense? That, you know, we're not using the temporary temporary use ordinance to expand the allowed uses, at least in the residential zone.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
There are a number of events where people currently do have a temporary use, like I've been to children's birthday parties where an ice cream truck is there for a day. So food vendors sometimes, you know, it's desirable for community members to have those for a day, and sometimes they need a day to stage and figure out electricity and stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily want to restrict food vendors. And then and maybe there's just a time limit on that particular use, that if it's a food vendor in the residential zone, it can't be there for more than 48 hours or something like that. Another example would be video game truck birthday parties. There's a lot of like kids' birthday, the tumble bus. You know, there's things that come in for children's events that are 1 day or 2 days. And I wouldn't want to restrict those in the residential zone. So if we want to have an additional time period that's even shorter than the 7 days in the residential zone for these types of things, I want to make sure we leave the allowance for that.
Well, I think the 7-day exemption already covers those.
Does it?
No, I don't think
Because
it
it's,
does. Yeah.
if you're saying the underlying use is not conform.
So to reread what my log 23 was saying, with any temporary use or structure with a term less than 1 week in any given 3-month period, the underlying development standards of the zoning designation applicable to the site on which a temporary use or
Okay.
structure do not apply under this provision.
But we didn't accept that.
No,
We
I thought we did. That's,
We did?
that was the log 23 item. Yeah.
yeah, I wrote down that we
Yeah.
accepted log 23.
We accepted log 23, so we want to exempt the land use restrictions for a 1-week use in the residential code, zone.
Correct.
I didn't know that. I would not be. I like, actually, Commissioner Act uses 48 hours for food trucks and event type things.
So for me to understand, I guess to restate what you're saying is the 7-day exemption would be for anything that conforms to the underlying code. It would not require a permit.
Well, they're exempt. I see what you're saying. Yeah,
And then,
I see what you're saying.
if it does not conform, it would be exempt only if the use is less than, say, 48 hours.
Yes.
Okay. I could get on board with that.
Every garage sale is under 48 hours, estate sales, lemonade stands. Commissioner Act raises a great point because we've done those. I've had those trucks and stuff, and those are handy. I just wasn't thinking now that they would need some type of temporary permit.
So it would tighten the 7-day to actually make it so they have to fit within the land use code. And then have the broader one just for a 48-hour.
Yes, that's a great
I'm good
point.
with that.
All right, I am. I'm good
I
with
doubt
that.
anyone will actually apply for that.
I don't either. I was
Well,
about to say,
According
how
to
much-
this, you don't have to, so
Yeah.
you're exempt, so.
we can have it over under, have a dinner bet on how many permits they get for weddings and stuff. Okay, do we have the next bucket?
So understanding this one, there are no other criteria of approval outside of the ones that are already listed, which address the noise, nuisance, other standards that were already in the draft. There's no criteria above that. Okay, bucket 3. What land use review type would be required for a temporary use deviation? We can discuss that as well.
Are we talking about temporary use or are we talking about structure? I mean, because you can't get a use variance. And I don't, is there a deviation for use? Can you get a use deviation under the current code?
No, I think this was just written here in short form. I think it would end up being a temporary structure
Non-conforming structure.
deviation or something.
Temporary
yeah.
structure. deviation.
Yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
are. We're talking about it. And, well, if we just went by the code, the current code right now for a permanent structure, you wouldn't be able to get a deviation or a variance, which is exactly what I would have wanted had the council not kind of green lighted the country club. So I sent out that email today. We're kind of really trying to, I know that the council doesn't want us to come back and say, hey, give back the key that you got. And tear down, but we have to keep it from metastasizing throughout the single family zone where we worked so hard in 2017 on the rewrite to get the scale and the massing and the gross floor area ratio correct. So, this is going to be a hard one. I mean, it'd be great. It'd be easy to come in and say whatever applies to a conditional use permit or a single family home applies to a temporary use. But we've got one that's been permitted, a big one too. So I think that we're going to have to actually on this one go through the criteria and say nobody else gave any criteria, but I put some out there. Setbacks, how big is the lot? I think a really important one is hey, how many people does this serve? I was talking to Mayor Neese and he sat there and said, well, if the school district ever had the money for it, they would love to put a cover over their tennis courts that they have there by Northwood, which would, make sense. That would be good because it's a huge piece of property. It's really set back from single family zones. The view is pretty much blocked a lot of ways. I think that either we can't come in and say no, because then the council is going to say, well, we already said yes. So, we expected, I've already been told this, use your brain. You keep telling us that you're smart, so prove it. And I think that's what the criteria we're going to have to come up with. We have to give the code official some subjective and objective criteria that he can say yes and no. And it's going to be more important that he be able to say no and point to it. If there's an appeal or something, he can sit there and so the country club one has some advantages. It once was permitted. I guess they let the permit lapse, but they used to have a cover, my understanding, on those tennis courts. It's interesting because it's set back on its property, so it's quite a distance to the next single family house. It's the houses to the north are actually in the PB zone. And then the houses to is the horse farm is next. There's not a house. It's residentially zoned, but it's a house. So, and it serves, I'm sure, hundreds of people play tennis on there during the winter. I think a lot of the high school kids, at least they all testified that, this would really be used. So I think this is going to be the one that we're going to have to spend the most time on the criteria. We don't want it to be in the single family zone. We don't want somebody to say, hey, I've got a tennis court and it's right next to somebody's house and they put a 40-foot, inflatable balloon on it for 6 months. That's when we're going to get the blowback. Any other, sorry for dominating.
Yeah, I think log 34 was again one of my proposed amendments. I think the nature of it being a temporary use does afford, or kind of rationally, that some of the underlying development standards could be relaxed because it's, not a permanent structure. And so how do you let that happen? I think the country club, I happen to live near it and I drive by it every day, and seeing that bubble there is not pretty, I would say. And so I think a lot of what the underlying residential code is trying to do is preserve just the character of the neighborhood. So you don't have structures that are abnormally tall, or, houses that are built right up against each other or whatnot. And that's what that residential code is trying to do. And I think as long as this temporary use that can stay up for up to 6 months can mitigate the negative impacts that they're creating by deviating from those, then I would support it. I think, I would have no problems with the country club bubble as long as there was proper screening and trees. It was something that didn't visually impact the neighborhood.
They are planting trees, I'm told there. But I know that the council's overriding desire and the testimony that was there is legitimate. They are coming out and saying there are very specific, limited circumstances where this is going to serve so many people. It's a place for all the high school tennis players who can't play on their outdoor courts and the school can't afford the covers. They go there. So it serves that's what a conditional use permit really is. You're coming in and saying that this is a significant benefit to the community. So we're going to give you a conditional use. We're going to go outside the residential single family zone and give it. So that's why I keep thinking that I like his about the screening, and we can do some stuff with the setbacks, how far is it from the property line or a house? But also the main thing that I think would limit its availability on a house is how many people is this really going to benefit? Make it compelling. Commissioner.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot here, that needs to be kind of unpacked. And, I'm a little concerned if you think about, well, if some way you could justify it against the benefits to the citizenry, which of course is typically our charge, is we want to make sure that what we're doing benefits many citizens as possible. Then I think it's an interesting way of approaching this process, but it also feels really slippery. So I don't quite know how to codify that. Chair, you brought this up just a moment ago, the idea of a temporary use deviation and a conditional use from the city's point of view. Do you see them as two entirely different things, or is there a merging in this way? Because is there a temporary use conditional? I guess would be my question. If we want to move away from the idea of deviation. That's probably a huge loaded question, but just can you help me understand? I'm much more familiar with conditional use than deviation from the
Yeah,
architectural
I
side.
mean, they're similar. So a conditional use permitting process. So there's permitted uses and conditional uses, and then prohibited uses. So conditional uses are things that we allow, but you have to meet certain criteria in order for it to be approved. In this case, we're talking about temporary uses, so things that are only going to be there for 6 months out of the year or less. And you know, we're talking about some of these that potentially also don't meet code requirements. So, you know, that there's different words that different jurisdictions use for a process to approve things that don't meet some code requirements, variance, deviation, departure. I think there's a few choices as far as what word we call it, but those would be the ones that seem to fit this circumstance.
I mean, the appeal of conditional is that there is an interpretation from the review side. You know, so there could be a condition, you know, that conditional is that there's a substantive benefit to the citizenry, you know. It just feels more negotiable on the conditional use rather than deviation and
I think you're right, you know, so you have to distinguish use from the size of the structure, to the lot ratio. That's basically, so conditional use
Mhm.
allows a use that is not allowed in the zone, but does not allow you to have greater regulatory limits. So, but now what we're actually talking about here is we're talking something like the tennis club. Their cover is an allowed use. That's within their conditional use.
Okay, yeah.
But it's the structure that doesn't meet it.
Okay.
And so that's the slippery slope when you allow a conditional use, which already has a benefit from having the conditional use, to then be able to have greater regulatory limits.
Exactly.
So, but, we're stuck. We're stuck with the country club. That's been done. And so, and I can see that there's, very, very limited circumstances, like tennis, covering the tennis courts for the high school or something, that it makes sense. It benefits enough of the community and it can be screened and it's not close enough to a house or something like that, that we can craft something that gives the code official authority in limited circumstances to say yes, but also, if you're, you know how it is on the planning side, everybody comes and knocks on your door, wants you to be Santa Claus. And so you have to have some things where you could come in like and a great objective one is where you come in and say, well, we're only, show me the, hundreds of citizens that it will benefit, and that you're not going to charge a separate, charge for it, so you're profiting on it. That kind of like what you're saying for conditional use, you're right, that thinking that this is a real special benefit.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of when we adopted the marina regulations last summer, was that? One of the requirements to get a marina permitted is that it must serve at least 50 people. It needs to be an organization or business serving at least 50 people, I believe. The wording was something like that. And so something similar could fit here.
Okay, yeah.
And that would prevent the single family from erecting a giant structure right next to their neighbors.
Absolutely.
To the question though, criteria of approval, I think what I've heard and agree with is, height, the setback, and those are the big ones, right?
And gross floor area. It's gonna
Yeah.
be the other one.
See, the thing is, I think probably virtually, maybe not the beach club, but virtually every conditional use on the island exceeds the gross floor area to lot ratio, because in 2017, we reduced that 5% from 45 to 40. And a lot of them were already beyond that. They were grandfathered in. So that's, take the JCC or something. That is its big constraining issue that it has, it doesn't want to take down its building because then it's going to actually get less gross floor area to lot area ratio. But I think we can come up with something that does both.
So I'm hearing there's an interest in having some dimensional standards, even if they're greater than what's in the code for a regular use. There should be some upper limit on what you could do with these larger temporary uses.
Yeah, there probably should, because we can't just have zero limits. That's good.
And that would be probably both considering the lot size, the building size, the setbacks from adjacent residential buildings, things like that.
Lighting. If that's not already covered.
Right, yeah, no, that's
Yeah, I guess. I
noise.
don't know how feasible this is to kind of approach it this way, but when I think about what I'd like to see in something that's built that's beyond the regulatory limits is that there's accompanying mitigation efforts to, so, if, and maybe it's tying, if you get extra height, then you have to provide, extra screening. I think one thing I've been thinking about like setbacks with the country club, they're fortunate that they've got the kind of horse stables nearby. There's no structures near, but maybe you require that there's an easement that the neighbor does not build anything within a certain distance of the temporary structure for whatever period of time that the permit is active. So
Then you're penalizing, you're
But-
penalizing the property owner for the temporary use structure.
The neighbor would have to agree to
What was I going to?
maybe.
Okay, well, I think that we have the framework, don't you think? And with this really helpful framework, if others have, I sent out like 10 or 12, some are good and some are bad. But if you think about it, noise, light, trees, hours of operation, I don't know what it is, but the criteria that, like he says, mitigates it in the neighborhood, benefits a lot of people. And I agree with Allison. If we're talking about a really big property, here's the funny thing that I notice when architecture can play such a difference. They have a permanent cover, that doesn't, it's like an A-frame over their indoor tennis courts. And it's a permanent structure and it's a very attractive structure. Part of the reason is that big green blob is so unattractive from an architectural standpoint. I don't know, so, but I digress. Should we move on? Did we give you everything you need?
I think so. I think we can draft something
Okay.
that
Yeah.
addresses those concerns.
We can take a crack at it and then talk about it more at the next meeting.
Is that the last question on this bucket? Because there's another topic I'd like to jump into.
No, I did want to revisit the review type.
Right.
I think earlier in the meeting, we kind of tabled that discussion on the deviation, a separate review. I think it ended up as a type 3. Just want to make sure if we're all good with that one.
I think so.
Okay.
I think type 3, people think, oh, type 4 is more extreme because it goes to the hearing examiner. Some of them, God bless them. I don't think that they have the same nuance really as city staff.
Great.
The only thing I might bring up is a type 4, if we're talking about public benefit, it's involving the public at that particular point. I mean, that's my only slight hesitation in what you said. I really like what you said, Chair, but just, if we codify the idea of having maximum benefit for citizenry, if we involve them in the process, there's some aspect of that I just think it could truncate debate around who's going to benefit. And if there's one outstanding voice and the huge majority of people benefit and they like it, then it's a way to sort of involve them early
Well,
on.
It's
There's
sort of-
public notice for type 3.
In type 3, you get mailed notice and they put the notice.
Everyone within
out,
300 feet gets a
on
mail.
the,
But is there a public hearing?
there is.
There is, okay.
If
Okay.
somebody wants to
there?
appeal, right?
No.
If there's an appeal, there would be an appeal hearing,
Oh,
but
if
there's
there's
no
appeal.
hearing for the decision.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you.
But, I understand what you're saying. I will also say this, that the hearing examiner usually follows the city's recommendation about 90% of the time, 95. So, yeah, I don't know.
certainly open for debate, but just wanted to kind of lay that on the table.
No, we can think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay,
And then the other kind of aspect of this, which we kind of started talking about in the normal temporary uses, but a part of my proposed piece of this was that if you successfully get a deviation approved, that approval would last for, 10 years or 20 years, and the annual renewals would be a type 2 or a type 1 or whatever.
I think that the staff had it in here, or somebody had it in, it was like a type 4 and then a type 2. And
Right, but
leaning towards type 3, but Commissioner Perez raised some really good points, but then it would be type 2. But I know what you're saying, and we get back to the same issue. If somebody is going to be a conditional use permit, because of the criteria we're talking about. And then if they're going to build something that's beyond the regulatory limits, it's not going to be cheap.
right, so that's where I'm saying that that land use decision for the deviation would have an approval that's tied to 20 years or whatever it is.
I mean, like Commissioner Accuse's framework.
Right, and then the renewal process would just be a type 2, standard renewal, as long as the deviations have not changed.
Right.
Then you can get the same.
That's what I was thinking. Does that sound good? You're the expert, Commissioner Acknews. You came up with the framework. Okay, yeah.
Is 20 years the right number?
Yeah, why don't we just stay with that earlier framework that we had?
The 5 years and the 20 years.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, because those 30-year ones, those are applicable to like actual leases
right.
as opposed to temporary uses.
And we answered this question. So that wraps up temporary uses. I think we can bring a more finalized version back to you. Next, we would go through commerce on public property kind of line by line and make motions to recommend those log numbers.
You want us to do that? We can do that. Spend.
It's 7:45. I don't know. Yeah.
Do anybody want a 5-minute break, or you want to soldier on? Okay. All right, we're gonna go on. We'll go through it line by line. I mean, we're talking about commerce on public property, right?
Right.
So, and is this in all zones, or is this in the town center and commercial zones?
This is. Let me pull it up. Sorry for the scrolling. This is currently within the town center zone, but there are proposals to expand it.
Let's see, log 3A.
So I don't know if we want to start at the top, log 2A and 2B, deciding between those alternatives or none, or amending one of those alternatives, or proposing a different.
That was mine. And I'm happy to go propose a motion for the staff alternative.
Okay, because I do like the staff alternative. It's very good. Do you want to make a motion?
Sure. Are we ready?
Yep.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to amend MICC 1906-050 Commerce and Temporary Structures on Public Property, Section A, to have a second sentence that reads, the provisions of this chapter do not exempt proposed activities from compliance with other titles of the Mercer Island City Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so Commissioner Accuse has made a motion to adopt log B, and Commissioner Gibson has seconded it. Is there any discussion or questions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Excuse me, one moment, please.
Sure.
And the motion was made by Hughes, and I'm sorry, who seconded it?
Commissioner Gibson.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you.
I think the next one is also mine.
Is this, are we moving now to 3A, B,
Oh, yeah,
and C?
3A.
All
yeah.
right.
3A. Oh, yeah, this is yours. 3AB.
Who made the motion for any of these? And I think we should
The
vote.
B,
It's you and Kate.
3A is the chairs. 3B is mine and 3C is a combination of mine and the chairs.
Just before we do this, let's just kind of get a quick read. Do we want to expand these temporary uses beyond the town center to the commercial office zone and PBZ zone, which is the South End Shopping Center, which is politically tricky zone, but
Do I need to make a motion for that discussion?
no, I mean, you're gonna have to choose one of these, so I just thought maybe we could get a feeling of what the commission's leaning towards.
If you're going to debate it, we need a motion, but
To adopt one specific one or all three? I mean, do we want to go through A, B, and C and say vote no, or just start with a consensus, maybe which one we're gonna?
I'm okay with consensus. If you want to do a consensus and then make a motion, I think that that'll work.
Right, I'm just.
Would you
yeah,
agree,
that works.
Allison?
Okay, so what do you guys think? Do you want, the town center, obviously, do you want to also add in the CO zone, which is down by the city hall, or the planned business zone?
Just because I put it in there, the reason I added PBZ and CO has to do with some discussions with council in the last planning commission group about the potential to use the commercial office zone for low-income housing, because there's a big chunk down there owned by the city. And the mayor had proposed that that would be a good place potentially to have that. There was a lot of discussion among the planning commission that if you're going to have low-income housing near that on-ramp, you're going to have to address things like the need of public transit and grocery and, coffee shop and whatnot. Things that for higher density living, you're going to want to have a few business features. So I wanted to, in planning for that potential shift, make those opportunities available so they didn't limit the discussion about that housing.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question for the staff? So this whole section here is really pertaining to commerce on sidewalks and roads, not necessarily within parcels that are either publicly or privately owned, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Right, so when we're talking about the PBZ zone on the south end, it would be really the right away portions that perimeter it, not are
Yeah.
interior to it. And so
I'd also like to add, that first criteria of approval for these is that the location where the commerce on public property has to have an active business license directly adjacent to it. So it would just be right out in front of their
Oh,
storefront
Yeah, so we're almost talking like street
Yeah.
and sidewalk dining.
and the outdoor dining, yes.
And, again, this was put in, and I'm happy to take PBZ out and just leave it CO. The assumption would be that there would be a massive redevelopment of that city lot for low-cost housing. But maybe we can deal with that if that passes first. But I thought council already,
They did
acted
not
on the-
rezone or add additional uses to that zone at this time.
at this time. Okay, so maybe we can deal with that at the time that they do, or is that your recommendation that we?
Yeah, I mean, as those properties are currently developed, it's kind of the same issue with the PBZ where there's usually a large parking lot between the street and sidewalk and the building. So I don't think there's anywhere that currently could do commerce on public property.
Okay, I'm happy to withdraw this suggestion for now, and maybe if the council revisits the housing issue at a later date.
I personally am for allowing, the use of public property for, commercial use and outdoor dining. People have been, banging for that all along. I mean, this is one of the things that really drove this is the outdoor dining and COVID. So I can't imagine that people in the South End wouldn't want to, have a drink or something outside if somebody put some tables. So I personally think that we should do the one that includes the PBZ and the commercial office zone too. I don't know if it's going to happen in the commercial office zone, but I don't know too many citizens who don't like that in the commercial areas. That's my feeling. What about you?
Well, just to clarify, all of the dining area, uses are in the PBZ are
Yeah.
they're far away from the actual sidewalks and rights of way that this would apply to. And so including the PBZ in here, it doesn't actually entitle additional areas to, it's all on private property, which they're allowed to do outdoor dining there already. So
It really won't apply. This is really about
it just
the town
doesn't,
center.
I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiment that, yes, we should be allowing these things, but I think from a practical standpoint, it just
You-
doesn't apply.
Do you think that?
Unless there's redevelopment, from the commercial office zone, it wouldn't apply.
Yeah, I mean, just
Or
to me, I
changes.
mean, it's interesting that it's only in the town center and not in the commercial office and then down south. There's some sort of exclusivity that's implied, to the town center being, obviously, there's a lot of density associated with it, but I think I'm actually interested in applying this to the other zones. And just sort of seeing what happens with that sort of opening of the mindset. I think that there's something that it would encourage redevelopment, I think. It would encourage reexamination. So I think I'm for that.
Okay, so which is the most expansive? It looks like 3B. That is town center, planned business zone and commercial office zone. And then C is town center, planned business and commercial office. Those look like the same.
They are the same.
Zones.
The difference is the C adds the first one, A, which was yours for public property. We discussed that a little bit last time. So my preference is B as opposed to C. Because I think the definition of public property and rights of way are different. I think staff had a comment on that.
But is there any additional zones that we're talking about?
No,
no
change in zones between B and C.
All right, well, why don't you make a motion then?
I think if I make this motion, we can't go back to do C, or maybe we could to amend or to do A.
Well, you want B, right?
If you want to do a motion for B and someone else wants to do A, they can make
Okay.
a second motion on
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
Then I would like to make a motion to amend section B to read the provision of the section shall only apply to public sidewalk, streets, rights of way within the town center zone, planned business zone, and commercial office zone as written in Exhibit 2.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. We're now to 14B, section C, but log 14B.
Wait,
Oh, log,
you didn't do yours. 3A?
well, you just did 3B. Why would I do 3A?
You can add public property.
Oh,
That's
it's-
important. We're gonna skip that. Okay.
Okay, there's a log 4B. Am I missing something?
4A.
There's a C.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Be a typo or something.
I think it's just 4B, yeah.
Yes, no, there's a 4B, and this is by
There
Commissioner
is.
Perez.
Oh. Hang on. So this is, this is thinking, or this is working through the idea of public property as opposed to the right of way. And I think we've kind of gone through this. Some of the staffing information was very, very clear in terms of them being two very, very different considerations. So actually, I'm going to move on 4B to withdraw 4B.
All right. Do you need a motion to adopt 4A if 4B has been withdrawn? Yes,
Yes, because you don't have to adopt any of these.
I see. I will make the motion. I move that log 4A, section C be adopted. Is there a second?
Motion fails for lack of a second.
All right. So that's it. We're gonna just not have a section 4?
Well, the original language.
Okay. What's next?
So we can get to 14, when we get to the main 14 section through the matrix. This is just where it would land in the code, so we can go to log 5, I believe.
Okay, log 5, section D, log 5. Whose motion is this?
It's okay.
That would be mine, and we did have some discussion about this. And I think the staff made the comment, it's not clear how an applicant can adequately show they're in the process of applying for a business license. I think it would be that they've submitted an application.
They apply online through the state, so we don't really have visibility on that until the complete, like the business license is issued.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I think my concern here was that to encourage redevelopment where we want to encourage it. If people are thinking about scenarios for that redevelopment, PBZ is a perfect example. Do they want to have frontage on the street side, right? Are they applying, they want to think about whether or not certain business investments in certain businesses might want to like invest in that redevelopment if they think there's the option to do X, Y, or Z.
I guess my comment was I don't see how somebody without a business license really can be an applicant or apply. And I don't think staff wants to have a lot of queries about people who don't have a business license. If you have a business license and you want to use this public property for commerce, great. I mean, that's what we want. So, I mean, I don't.
Yeah, and I think if someone's interested in like opening a new business and they're looking at various spaces and wondering, what could they do there, both inside the building and then for outdoor dining or something like that. Those kind of questions could be answered in a pre-application meeting, regardless of whether they have their business license yet or not.
And this is a criteria for the permit being issued, so it would not prevent somebody without a business license from applying. It just wouldn't allow the permit to be issued until the business license is issued or until the business license itself is issued. So
So you're, in your experience as a commercial real estate guy, and you're saying that that's a pre-app process as opposed to speculative permitting.
not necessarily a pre-app process, but just that you can submit and get the permit to a point where it's basically ready to issue once you prove that you have your license. And so you can run both things in parallel theoretically, and then the city
Yeah.
just can't issue your permit until your license is approved.
Okay,
All right,
that makes sense. Then we don't need to consider that one for a motion.
all right. So it's withdrawn. Do you need some type of motion or is?
I didn't
it's
make a
because it's
motion.
No, I was talking, if she knew, it's within the main motion. I got it. All right. Log 6A and B. Whose are these?
Yours is A and Anthony's is B. Sorry, Commissioner Press.
Well, you know. Either one's, fine with me. I was just playing Scrivener there.
Yeah, just to be on the record, I was simply adding the environmental hazard as part of the consideration set.
Okay. You want to make a motion for 6B?
I make a motion to add 6B to the to the code that we're in the process of reviewing, to be accepted as indicated, an amendment D2 to read the location of the private commerce on public property activity does not need to create does not create a safety, noise, or environmental hazard for motorists, cyclists, or pedestrians.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Perez to adopt log 6B, seconded by Commissioner Acuse. Any debate, questions? Please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Just one moment, please.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Accused,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next, log 7, A, B, and C. So I know that mine was 7A. It was just scrivener. 7B, who did 7B?
That's me.
Okay,
I was just adding ADA.
and who's 7C?
It's staff combining ours.
Any strong emotions? You should. Staff is recommending 7C.
Yeah, I like the 7C.
All right, why don't you make the motion then, please?
I'd like to make a motion to amend D2A to read the private commerce on public property location maintains sufficient area for the free passage of pedestrians per ADA standards along sidewalks and access to other adjacent businesses
Is
for the
there,
matrix.
is there a second?
I second.
All right, a motion by Commissioner Acuse to adopt log 7C, seconded by Commissioner Perez. Any questions or debate? Please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Accused,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you.
I next, do we have another 6A, law 6A?
Yeah, so that one was combined with the first 6A, where business was struck for private commerce on public property. For consistency, if we want to adopt 6A so that it reads the same here, it would, yeah, that would make those consistent across those numbers.
All right. Do you need a motion for that?
I believe so.
Okay.
Sure.
I'll make the motion. I move that log 6A, section 2B, be adopted to read: the private commerce on public property location does not obstruct the views of motorists turning into or out of a street or parking lot. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, debate? Please call the roll.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye. Now we're moving to log 8A and log 8B. Guessing that 8A was mine. Right, all right. 8A is mine. 8B is, looks like maybe staff. No, Kate Hughes. Okay, Commissioner Hughes, tell me a little bit about WAC 1736040. Don't know what
I'm
it
reading the
means.
staff response and it sounds like it's moot because it's applicable across the state already.
I'm sorry, so,
It's an unnecessary amendment.
okay, so what about mine up above? Do we not need hours of operation in the text?
It's right now left to code enforcement is what staff are saying. And they don't want to restrict business that isn't disturbing neighbors if it's being handled effectively currently.
All right,
But I don't know if it is because I personally haven't made a noise complaint, but I don't know, other people may have experience with that.
sure. Allison, is that, the city's view that we don't need the hours of operation because there's, the limits actually go to noise, light, and disturbance? Or Molly, I'm sorry.
I was responding to another question from someone else outside. of this
Oh, okay.
meeting.
I mean, that makes sense.
We're talking about 8A
Yeah,
and the staff response there.
Yeah, any complaint about, well, so if the reason for limiting these hours of operation is to reduce the noise and light and those types of things, that would be under our nuisance code already. And someone can submit a code enforcement request and the code enforcement officer would go out there and look and see if they're violating any of those nuisances.
Okay, I know it's just a halftime code enforcement officer, right?
that's correct.
All right, I mean, okay, I'll withdraw it. It's in the town center, commercial zones. What about log 9? It's,
That was only if 8B, but I withdrew 8B, so log 9, I'll also withdraw because it doesn't work without 8B.
so, log 9, you were gonna strike, no music, the sound is amplified, but now it's back in. I'm confused, or were you adding it?
I was gonna strike the music or sound is amplified, referring to the state standards, but we already deferred to the state standards, so
All right, you're gonna withdraw it.
actually now I'm confused. It should be doing it.
I think it originally, the original ordinance said no music or sound is amplified, which
I think I do want to strike that because don't we desire to have restaurants be allowed to play a little music outside or?
but this is outside.
Yeah, is that not desirable?
I will just say that there is a kind of a tension, and especially like in the town center, there are some people who think this is their neighborhood. They live there. And then there's others who don't live there and think, hey, it should be more vibrant and everything. And they're like a Mercer Island and they don't. I mean, I think that if you're going to be outside and you're getting the benefit of using public property, I'm not a big fan of the music or amplified sound. So I kind of like the what staff had. I think that's a lot in the town center. If you got some person out there, a band or, unless it's. No, I'm trying to think. I mean, I remember Barrels, that was during COVID, had an outside band.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah,
Deb's
yeah.
gonna get me in trouble here for having a conversation.
I did.
And it wouldn't have to be live music. It could be any music played over speakers would count as amplified sound.
Would be prohibited.
Right.
As written.
Yeah. Chair Gibson, what do you think? I mean, Vice Chair Gibson, what do you think?
Does the nuisance code already have limitations on noise levels and so on?
I believe it's the wax section.
Oh, the
um,
wax
for-
section?
yeah.
So if we're under that section, which would be, under a certain noise level, then I don't see any harm with music.
All right, I'm opposed. I like staff's thinking and language on this. It's the town center has people who live there and other eateries and stuff, so amplified sound, I'm guessing it's, not gonna be the Beatles, so who knows what you're gonna get, but it's your motion. Would you like to make it?
Yeah, I'll make it just to see. I'm not sure how.
Sure.
Commissioner Pressfield, so I'd like to make a motion to strike D3C, which reads, no music or sound is amplified.
Is there a second? There being no second, the motion fails. Okay, log 10.
49?
Yeah, 49 was added after this was all drafted. So without reordering the numbers, I threw 49 in here in the way it goes with the code.
Yeah, what happened was 49.
It's in line in the matrix.
Oh,
and
I see,
the-
okay, right. Yeah, well, the design requirements, there's no design commission anymore. But, okay, so this is your motion, or your motion. Okay, physical improvements can be removed or secured, but not in ocean at the end of permitted use. This is you, Commissioner Perez?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to connect the dots here.
Fiscal improvements can be moved to secure. So I think that there was some confusion a little bit in terms of the way that so the staff response, I think, added some clarity here that not in operation limits a requirement to closed at business hours. So I think the implication is that a temporary use is to be removed on a daily basis when they're shut for business. And I'm trying to resolve that in my mind, that if we are talking about adjustments or temporary use in certain areas of the city, having that removed on a daily basis seems like an exorbitant request.
I had that same concern when I read it, but I do
Yeah.
see it can be removed or secured. I only saw the removed when I read it, but when I went back and read it, it said removed or secured, which I guess, put away is kind of what they're saying.
Great. Okay.
But I had the same thing, but I don't know if at the end of permitted use helps because then it makes it sound like it doesn't have to be removed or secured until the permit runs. So I think that the city's got it down here pretty well. They're just saying it has to be removed or secured when you're not using it. Basically like your kid, don't leave all your toys lying around. So do you want to make the motion?
I'm gonna make a motion to remove.
Or you just can withdraw it?
I'm just gonna withdraw it. Yes, thank you.
Okay, log 10.
That was already approved in minor.
Yeah, that's what I thought. All right. Well, thank you. Log 11A and B. I think 11A, is that just me? Making busy work? Probably. Yeah. And 11B is, who did 11B?
I think that was me again.
I don't.
Yeah.
Have any strong emotions on mine. What's an alcohol required? Oh, I see, like a liquor control board.
Yeah, it's that, it's notifications, public notifications, and then it's also barriers. So there are some other requirements in the building code,
Okay,
just adding some additional clarity. But I think that if you could say, I actually think that I could remove this because 11A, I think, handles it from the other demarcation point of view and keep it generalized.
all right. Either way, both of them contain my language, so we should probably do a motion on 11A or 11B. Which do you want?
11A.
All right, I'll make the motion. I move to adopt 11A, section 6, to read the location of a private commerce on public property engaged in the sale of alcoholic beverages is separated from the public space with a barrier, fence, landscaping, or other demarcation. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Perez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Now we're moving to log 12A.
Yeah, so this was mine.
Okay.
It just had to do with, if we're gonna be allowing people to occupy the right of way, that the city has the right to kick people off the right of way for maintenance and other needs. The city had, the staff had proposed a 12B, which I am more in favor of. So I'd like to make a motion to incorporate log item 12B as proposed.
Where is 12B?
Second.
It's on page 4.
Okay, did you get that? That wasn't a very,
I'm trying to find the reference. I heard
Yeah.
12B and I don't see a 12B, but
don't
I have
see
it on the
12B
screen
either.
now.
12B is just moved to a different section. It's on page 4 of our packet.
Oh, yeah, okay, towards the bottom.
thank you.
Okay, was that clear enough motion, or do you need a better motion?
No, I have it now. So I have Gibson and I'm sorry, who made the second?
Commissioner Acuse,
Thank you.
is there any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Moving out to the log 13A and 13B. Who proposed these?
This was also me.
All right, could you
Um,
speak to them?
Yeah, so the intent here was to kind of limit the amount of parking stalls that can be utilized under this provision. Again, I think the staff came up with a better alternative. So I'd like to make a motion to incorporate log 13B as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion by Vice Chair Gibson to adopt log 13B, seconded by Commissioner Perez. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next one I see is 14A. Section G, term. Whose motion was this?
This is me again.
All right, can you speak to it?
Yes, I believe. Right. So this temporary regulation has been in place for 2 years now, I believe. 1 year. And by and large, I understand has not been used other than maybe barrels. And so, you know, when I reviewed this initially, and talked to business owners in the town center, the process just to, you know, do a little pop-up thing right outside their door and have to go get a permit for something that's just a 1 day or a couple day thing, was just too burdensome and they didn't want to do it, and that's why they're not doing it. And so this exemption, similar to kind of the temporary use permits that we talked about, was if the use in the right of way is bracketed by a short use. Here I've proposed 1 week, but I think there's, you know, we can talk about what that duration is, that they would be able to do it without getting a permit.
Right.
The other clarification in here is that by exempting them from a permit does not exempt them from the criteria that's outlined in here. So they'd still have to maintain all the criterias there, but it would just make it easier for businesses to utilize this. I guess if we want to go into discussion here, again, the staff, I like the staff's proposed
That was what I was gonna
amendment,
ask.
which is
It's a good
earlier.
sentiment. Which is better language in your opinion, A or B?
B, so I'd like to make a motion to incorporate log item 14B.
Is there
Second.
any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Okay, we have section 15A, B, C, and D. I'm not assuming that anybody is talking about not exempting the farmer's market. So who made which motions? I see it's 15A is Commissioner Gibson, B and C, Commissioner Hughes, and D is staff proposed.
I
So,
like the staff proposed personally.
okay, what's the, either maybe you or Commissioner Gibson can just give us a brief understanding of your proposed amendments?
I'll defer to the vice chair.
Okay. Appreciate that. So we just approved that uses less than 1 week do not require you to get a permit. And so hold on, now that I'm saying this, I realize my flaw in the logic. All right. It requires an adjacent use, right? And that's really the crux of this line item. Okay, so my understanding of this, my mind's been changed, so
Yeah, you
I
know,
take back 15A.
but I see where staff, they also included the Mercer Island Farmers Market. And I think that kind of makes sense, you know, just real clarity that there's no doubt about it, that the farmers market is exempt. So I'm going to move that we adopt log 15D staff's proposed recommended amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Yeah.
Oh, please go.
Yeah, so the other kind of event that came to mind, and I'm not sure if this totally applies, the Art Uncorked. I understand that's in the Greta Hackett Sculpture Park, but does that bleed into the right of way also? That's,
I believe that event gets a special events permit through the Parks Department. Which is, since it's on park property, there's a separate
right,
process for permitting those.
but they don't use the right of way that's adjacent, that runs.
They may also
parallel
have a
with that.
right of way permit. I'm not sure about that.
I think they also get a right of way permit for any like street closures or anything, rerouting traffic or something, but
So wouldn't they also need to be exempted from this because Art Uncorked is not an adjacent business?
if the commerce on public property action that we're talking about is on the park's property, then they're under the special event permit. Any kind of street closures is the actual commerce piece.
Right, so if there's
on
a
the street.
vendor booth selling wine or other products, that's what we'd really be talking about.
Okay, so they, like that event in particular, they'd have to keep those booths on the park property. They wouldn't be able to bring that onto the street, okay.
Yeah. Well, they don't have any serving of alcohol at the Art Uncorked, on the Sunset Highway there. They just have ticket sales and, where you get your little tickets. It's not 100%, in the sculpture garden. But I don't know, do we need to add it? I don't want to stop Art Uncorked.
I mean, we can have another conversation with the Public Works team and see if there's an interest in adding that from the city side.
All right. So is there a second? I have a second.
Could I ask just a quick question? If I may, Chair?
Yes. Oh, please.
There's log 15C talks about events sponsored in part or full by the city. And I'm just trying to understand, would Art and Cork fall underneath that? I mean, is it sponsored in part or by the city?
I think it's a Chamber of Commerce event. The city does have some involvement with it. I don't know if that qualifies as sponsored or not.
Well, I like that provision because it started to allow the city to be in control of future events in the. Let me think about this for a second. It just allowed a conduit to come through the city for large scale events instead of being built off-site and then trying to get to the city to get it permitted. So there was something in that language, sponsored in part or full by the city, that I'd asked the rest of the members to consider as
Yeah.
part of this under 15D.
Yeah, I was gonna make a similar comment that, summer celebration and the farmer's market, and even Art Uncorked, they're great events, but if we just exempt them for those individual events,
Yeah.
it means that we would have to go through a regulatory process to exempt another event if, and I think if we could broaden just the definition of this exemption so that there's some leeway for future events, I think Commissioner Perez is on the right track where it's, sponsored in part and full by the city. That's an exemption in and of itself. It sounds like maybe the farmer's market and Art Uncorked don't fall under that definition, however, if I read that in the.
But we're just talking about an exemption. I mean, we're exempting things. We're not saying that they can't go get a permit. So these are known things. These are things that occur regularly. And so they're so well known and liked and everything. We're just going to exempt them. But if somebody else comes along and they have a pretty neat idea or something, they just go down to the city and the city is going to permit it.
Well, the purpose for this exemption, from my understanding, is summer celebration and the farmer's market do not operate businesses immediately adjacent, which is one of the criteria for under this code, and that's why that exemption exists.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the hurdle that we're trying to get over.
I see.
And
Commissioner Hughes, did you have?
Yeah, I was gonna make a suggestion on, is this your motion, Chair?
It did.
And I'm the second. I was gonna propose a motion within the motion
That would be an amendment to the motion.
I would like to propose an amendment to the motion. If the chair concurs, the provisions of this section shall not apply to the annual event known as the Mercer Island Farmers Market, the annual city-sponsored event known as Summer Celebration, or other events partially or fully sponsored by the city.
Do
Would
you
that,
also-
would you be amenable to
I
that?
would, but do you want to add the language? Yes, I see, right. Yes, I am. I would be amenable to that and second the amendment, the motion to amend the amendment.
Or do you want, is there any debate or do you just want to proceed with the,
Just go to the.
thank
vote.
you. Commissioner, excuse me, Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Commissioner Perez.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, with that amendment now, we have before us the underlying motion to adopt log 15D. Any discussion or any amendments further to that? Seeing none, please call the roll.
I had it recorded as 15B. That's okay.
I think 15D is staff's recommendation. Right?
Just one moment so I can correct what I have.
Yes, it's 15D as in Dan.
Commissioner Perez,
I'm sorry, can we, what do we,
Motion is to adopt log 15D, staff's
As amended.
recommended amendment with the amended language that Commissioner Acuse proposed, adding other events.
excellent, thank you. Thank you. Aye.
okay, excuse me, Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Next, I have, looks like,
Pardon me.
oh, yes.
I have to arrange a ride if we're gonna go up to 9 for my child. Some-
Well, we still have the park zone.
We've got a lot to do. Okay.
Yeah.
May we take a short break so that I can arrange?
This was the last,
This is, we only have one more.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry.
And you know, you could probably make it home and Zoom if we take a 10-minute break, if it's on the island. Give you a little extra time. All
It's
right,
not, I need a 20-minute break.
I have log 12B. Who proposed this?
I think we already approved
Yeah.
12B and 14B,
Yeah.
Oh, we did. All right.
which
So
I
I think we
think
just need
was the
the
last
final
one.
vote on the overall amendment.
So are we done on the, did I miss one?
Now we just gotta approve the overall.
All right.
Oh,
Does somebody want to make a,
The motion's already on the table, so I think we're.
So we still have, like, we just took general direction on part of this amendment, so I think we should hold off on doing the final vote on it until the next meeting, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think we have what we need for tonight, and we'll bring back an updated draft based on the feedback from the bucket questions, as well as the other approved items here, and then you can vote on that final draft in July.
great.
Do we
Well,
need to table the motion until the next meeting? Or is it not that formal?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I was addressing a technology issue over here, but I do want to speak to the fact that we still have the original main motion on the table.
That's what they
That
just
has-
asked. Do they need to vote to table that to the next meeting?
Why would you table it? Are you not done or?
They're gonna come back
So-
with some different language recommendations based on some feedback they
Yeah.
got tonight. So we're not ready to vote on the whole motion.
I think that makes sense.
To
I'm,
table voting for the next meeting.
I honestly, I don't know. And Kim, perhaps this is where you could weigh in. I don't know that you can table a motion. You can table an item, but I've not heard about tabling a motion.
I'm gonna check something.
Thank you.
It's basically the same thing we did with the park zone last meeting, right? Ah. That's why it just happened.
I don't want to get in trouble with them.
I don't have that. Experience tabling motion. It's just.
Maybe we just do it informally then.
Yeah.
And we could, as long as she's here.
Yeah, you can always waive your rules and just vote on this motion at your next meeting table. You need a second to table a motion. It's not debatable, not amendable, requires a majority. There you go. Motion to table.
So make a motion to table and
Motion to table the vote on the final amendment until we see the new language from staff at our next meeting.
Second.
Please call the vote.
thank you everyone for your patience while we got the expert on this. Okay, Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you.
So we have a 10-minute meeting, recess, I think. Okay, seeing that it is about 21 minutes till 9, why don't we recess until 10 minutes to 9? the meeting back in session and it is 8:50. Get my. Now we move to the Park Zone Code Amendment deliberation, and let's see. Sorry about this. Right, Park Zone Code Development Code Amendment, PCB 25-11. And this is to approve a recommendation regarding the Park Zone Development Code Amendment. Staff recommend the following motions. Move to recommend that the city council adopt the proposed new section MICC 19.05.050 Park Zone, new section 19.05.060 Park Zone Development Standards, and proposed amendments to MICC 19.16.010 definitions and 19.01.040 zone establishment. Do we have a motion for that recommendation? Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. At this point, does staff want to do a presentation? It doesn't look like we have, fortunately, too much to get through tonight to finalize this. I didn't know if you want to just maybe go through the amended ordinance.
Yeah, that was our
there's-
plan. We don't have a formal PowerPoint presentation, and we thought we could just kind of walk through the amended ordinance and the areas where we have drafted updated text for you to take a look at. And if there are further amendments, those can be made by motion.
All right, some are in blue and some are in red. Should we just go through them one by one? I mean, there's start with like 19.05.050. You know, there looks like there is some additions to the definitions.
Would you like just a quick overview of the updates in the code before you start getting into amendments and individual motions?
Okay, I mean, I read it pretty closely, but anybody?
We can jump right in. That's fine.
I'd like a quick review.
Okay. All right. So starting at the top, there were two separate amendments to the purpose statement. One to add shoreline access, and then another to add social spaces for individuals and gatherings. And the purpose that we ended up with kind of ended in a complete sentence, or ended oddly. So we've proposed some new language that slightly alters it to the last part of the purpose statement that reads recreation and conservation opportunities, and then social spaces for individuals and gatherings to separate those two out. Next, we've moved multi-purpose facilities up on the list in the permitted uses. This was number 12, and we moved it up to number 4 next to all the other types of facilities. The next change that is redlined here is an amendment that was adopted at the last meeting. This is basically an exemption from the exemptions for parking areas that are adjacent to residential zones to require a 20-foot setback. Staff looked into this, and there are a number of existing parking lots that are within 20 feet of a residential zone. Examples include Groveland Beach Park, Slater Park, and potentially Aubrey Davis and Homestead, as well as other parks. And so the staff recommendation here actually would be to remove this amendment because it would render a lot of existing parking lots non-conforming.
That was my amendment, and I wrote in and said I will file a motion to amend it and move that.
Okay.
Because of that.
We also have some more revisions to the trail standards. We started out with a proposed maximum width of 12 feet, and Chair Thompson had included an amendment to include shoulders in that maximum trail width. And then Commissioner Hughes also had an amendment related to shared use trails and a minimum trail width for shared use trails and some additional regulations for bollards and islands so that it doesn't reduce the trail width down even more. And so we've proposed some new language here that specifies what is included in the trail width. So basically that would be all hardscape materials and softscape materials like grass or vegetation or mulch would not be included in the trail width measurement. And then we've also proposed some different language. I believe Allison and Commissioner Hughes talked offline, and we've amended the part about shared use trails to be specific to paved trails, so concrete or asphalt. This would implement a minimum trail width of 10 feet with possibility of shoulders up to 2 feet. And then I think this is the same text for bollards and islands as well. One thing I want to note about this is that together, these two amendments for trail standards don't allow too much flexibility as far as trails go for trails that are considered multi-use paths. If you have a minimum width of 10 and a maximum width of 12, that's not too much to work with. And then shoulders come into that equation as well. Moving down the list, there weren't any more amendments to the impervious surface section. However, the more we talk about all the different documents that could take the place of being included in a park master plan, we wanted to maybe specify some of those documents just to make sure it was clear to the reader here. So we wanted to propose adding the pros plan and CIP to this list as well. And then also potential exemption for temporary uses as that was amended at the last meeting to be subject to the development regulations. And I think Allison will cover the lighting section here.
Yeah, so one thing we realized, there was a couple amendments made to the lighting section at the last meeting that each had very similar wording. And so we took a stab at crafting a new version of the amendment that incorporates both of those in more concise language, trying to keep the spirit and the intent of each of those amendments intact, but just with a smaller amount of words and less repetition. So it still maintains language around salmon friendly and dark skies and many of the same provisions that were there previously. And then on this shoreline recreation section, I did speak with Commissioner Hughes in between the last meeting and this meeting to better understand her proposed amendment here. And I also dug into several other planning documents and code sections to really understand how kind of the policy and regulations for shoreline recreation would intersect with this potential code amendment. And what I discovered is that a lot of the things that Commissioner Hughes was looking to permit and encourage, there was already language about that, either policy language, stating the city's intent to expand shoreline recreation and encourage better access to the shoreline through improvements. And also with the actual shoreline code, there was already some permitted uses that align with the types of things she had in mind, including public piers and docks and public facilities within that shoreline area, the 200 feet from the ordinary high water mark. I think those cover and already permit the types of uses that were envisioned here. And so our staff recommendation is just to remove this amendment, not make this amendment. If there's any questions about that, I can chat more about it once we get through this. There were just a couple of additional changes suggested in the definitions as well related to that shoreline issue. So at the last meeting, the word boathouses was added to, is that recreational facilities, I think. And just to avoid any confusion, I would recommend changing that from boathouses to another word with a similar meaning. Boathouses are prohibited as an overwater use in the shoreline code. And so I think it might be, this isn't exactly the same thing because I think Commissioner Hughes was speaking about a boathouse on land and not over water, but to avoid any confusion or conflict between these two code sections, I would recommend amending this to either say boat or watercraft storage or something along those lines. And then I just had one other suggestion here, under recreational uses, some water-based recreational uses could be added to the list if that's something that you'd like to see further emphasis on, like water-based recreation or boating and fishing or something along those lines. And then that shoreline park definition would be unnecessary because the shoreline code already defines a similar category, urban park. I'm blanking on the designation. Let me find it. Anyway, the shoreline code already includes a map that maps out the urban waterfront parks. And so I think, again, this kind of overlaps and duplicates that code section and just would not be necessary. I think that was it for the new proposed amendments.
Okay, considering the hour, shall we just dive right in? Okay, I am at MICC 19.05.050, section 8, a purpose statement. Is this yours, Commissioner Hughes?
I think this was a combo of Commissioner Perez and mine.
Okay, do you want to make a motion to adopt it?
The purpose statement?
Just a clarification, if it's already written in here, do we actually need a motion or? I just need to modify.
I think you would need a motion because this is slightly different than what was approved at the last meeting.
Right.
I see, okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to amend the regulation with the purpose statement in A as written in the draft.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Hughes to add the language in section A purpose, second by Vice Chair Gibson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Commissioner Perez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next one. Somebody want to make a motion to amend section C to add number 4, multi-purpose facilities.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I think just a clarification here that we're not adding this, we're just moving it up where it is on the list, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
May not even need a motion.
No
We're-
motion needed?
We're already halfway there.
Let's get her done.
All right, call the roll.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, turning to the next page, section B setbacks. This was my motion. Reviewed this, looked at the parks. I agree with staff. So I will make a motion to withdraw the language that was added in section 3 that reads, except as follows. Parking areas located adjacent to property that is zoned R 8.4, R 9.6, R 12, or R 15 require a 20-foot setback. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have kind of a clarifying question here. So if this stays in, it would technically be a legal non-conforming use, right?
Correct.
And legal non-conforming uses can still be maintain. So would repaving and striping be considered maintenance, or what's the threshold there that creates an issue for?
Yeah, usually
maintenance?
repaving and painting and things like that are okay. But if you're doing more of a full rebuild or reconfiguring it at all into a different shape or size, then it would need to be brought into compliance with the code. And so, you know, in this case, that would mean you'd have to remove that section of the parking lot that's within 20 feet of the adjacent property line. And it could potentially really reduce the size of those parking lots, or they would need to take up other areas within the park to maintain the current number of parking spaces.
Yeah, I sent in my emails. I noted, you know, when you look at it, all these parking lots have been in existence for a while, so the property owners are not surprised. And I don't think the pros plan has any new, you know, parking lots, any big ones that I can think of, except maybe some ADA ones, but those are small and
Yeah.
right near there for access. So, and I guess the no new net impervious surface would prohibit a parking lot, certainly. So, right, I think your idea was correct. So, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on now to 19.05.060 D Trail Standards. This is the staff's proposed amendment, section 1 and 2. Is there a motion to adopt this?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the language as written, except for, I think we do need some discussion about the 12 feet. And I'm wondering if we need to address the Aubrey Davis question first, because staff had a comment on that one. And I don't think we can resolve D trail standards until we resolve the Aubrey Davis question.
I think the Aubrey Davis question is up for discussion. We're here on trail standards. You want to make a motion to adopt this?
Well, I can't because there's a conflict with Aubrey Davis. If Aubrey Davis is in the park zone and staff has made a recommendation to take Aubrey Davis out of the park zone.
If I could speak to that, I don't think we have recommended changing your vote on adding Aubrey Davis to the park zone. However, in light of this trail standard, we wanted you to be aware that this would likely make trails in Aubrey Davis non-conforming if we keep 12 feet.
And that was 12 feet was the original PRC
Correct.
recommendation.
And they came to that with Aubrey Davis excluded from consideration. And so they had not evaluated the trails and other infrastructure in Aubrey Davis.
Can
for
you tell
conformance
us
with
what
their
the maximum
recommendation.
width of a trail is in Aubrey Davis?
So for example, the Mountains to Sound Trail, I think ranges from 12 to 14 feet in width. There are also a number of trail improvements that were made recently that have width over 16 feet in some places.
Could we,
Where's the 16? Are you talking about with gravel shoulders? I know that it's 12 feet paved through the Lid Park. You know,
including the overpass?
Yeah, we spent years on that. And then I thought that east of the town center, King County balked at doing 14 feet paved, but did do 12 feet paved with 2-foot gravel shoulders.
So I don't know the exact location of this trail, but I do have some project plans here that map out width in different places. And so what I'm seeing in this is that there are places that have trail width over 16 feet in Aubrey Davis Park.
Do you know
Is
where?
that all Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail? Because I'm wondering if we could just make an exception for the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail.
No, I think it's multiple trails. Let's see. So there were some trail, I don't know exactly where this is in Aubrey Davis Park, but there were some changes near the bathroom, I think maybe on the Lid, that is where the 16 foot width is coming from?
Trail comes past the bathroom, kind of next to the baseball
Well,
field.
That's a trail in a gathering area. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a trail. That's, they have the gathering. They had it before, you have a concrete entrance to the bathroom, but I'm pretty sure that the paved section east is 12 feet, and I know it's 12 feet through the Lid Park. Originally, there was going to be a plan for gravel shoulders, but the city has ran out of money, and so didn't do the gravel shoulders through the Lid Park. We have the one section. When we get in, since we're discussing it, I think that we should go back to the Parks and Recreation Commission recommendation, 12 feet. And kind of, I think that this is too constraining staffs, because there's no definitions in here for what is a shared use trail and a trail. And that means we're going to probably get into a situation where somebody could come in and say, now we got to put in gravel shoulders for every paved path. More of my think about it, we just go 12 feet and leave it open to interpretation. So if somebody comes in and says, because I don't think there's any paved path that's over 12 feet on the island. That's the actual trail, not the little section by the bathroom. And we can just
Can I ask a
go
question?
with it, because one of the things I just want to point out is the Parks Department doesn't have the money to be putting in gravel shoulders. They're expensive. They've already made it clear they're not going to maintain the gravel shoulders that King County put in east of the town center. They're already growing in with vegetation, which was the plan. So you end up spending this money on gravel shoulders that you can't maintain. And then when they grow in, you can't walk on them, and they're not good for a bicycle. So, I just don't see the city putting in any gravel shoulders. And maybe we just need to stay away from this whole issue and just go back to the PRC recommendation. Trail width shall not exceed 12 feet, and then we'll just leave it up to the Parks Department to interpret that as they need.
Can I
Yeah.
be recognized, Chair? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm fine with getting rid of the specificity and going back to 12 feet, but I do think we should say, with the exception of trails and WashDOT ownership, those will defer to WashDOT trail standards. And my main concern here is the safety of bicycle commuters, and there's just a lot of commuters that use that trail. And so that's, WashDOT already has specs, so we don't need to, by adding Aubrey Davis in, knowing that we already have some non-conforming trails, if we could call Aubrey Davis out as different, I think that would solve the problem. And then I wouldn't need all this detail.
But the problem is, if WashDOT goes to, let's say WashDOT goes to a 14-foot width limit, then all our trails are non-conforming, and we're going to have to start widening and spending millions of dollars on widening trails. I mean, the trails work right now. I mean, we went through 10 years on the Aubrey Davis Trail Safety Project, and we came up with what we have. We did the Aubrey Davis Master Plan. Since I live right next to the park, I was involved on that. It came to this consensus, after years and designs. I like the Park and Recreation Commission, and it gives them some leeway. If they decide they want to put in a gravel shoulder, which I don't think they're going to, they can, but it also doesn't limit them on making trails a certain width or not a certain width. That's how my thinking is. I've been thinking about it. Just take the shoulders out of it and see what happens with the discretion. Commissioner Perez?
I'll hold. Thank you.
Sorry, do we have a motion?
We do not.
We do not.
Okay, I'm gonna propose a motion, and just to telegraph here, I'm just gonna propose item 1 for now, then we can talk about item 2 separately. So I move to accept trail standards, item 1 and 1A, 1B as proposed.
Is there a second?
Give me a second. Second. So we have a motion by Commissioner Gibson to adopt section 1 of D as proposed by staff, seconded by Chair Thompson. Is there a discussion? Vice Chair Gibson?
I'd like to propose a motion that we add an item C that says exceptions, and Aubrey Davis Park is listed as an exception. And well, I guess I'll just leave it there, and I don't add anything unless there's a second, and then we discuss why. Is that correct, Deb? Okay,
I'm sorry, you need a second before you can debate the issue.
okay.
I second.
So the reason that I would want to add that is because if we adopt D1, A, and B, then there are trails in Aubrey Davis that are out of compliance. And to the chair's point that if WashDOT changes their standard to 14 feet, we're out of compliance. My experience is that we would be grandfathered in with they're not going to make us change the width of our trails. It would be if we redeveloped them. Is that a correct understanding, staff?
Yes, if anything were made legally non-conforming by this code amendment, it wouldn't mean we need to change the trails right away. It would just mean if we were in a situation where we were rebuilding them, then they would need to come into compliance with whatever the new standard is. Like I said, with parking lots, if we were just repaving or painting or otherwise maintaining a trail, it could remain at its current dimensions that are legally non-conforming.
And that this creating a non-conformance issue also would not limit the ability to maintain the trails or do maintenance
Correct.
projects.
You know, I don't think that this would make, first of all, you have to realize in Aubrey Davis Park, there are several different paved paths. For example, there's the one along the east side, which might be called the Sound of Mountains, but then there's one on the other side, which is also used by bicyclists and people who roll. And then there's another paved one that goes up on the east side by the basketball court. There is a proposal in the master plan for an ADA paved trail that would go from West Mercer Way to the basketball court. You know, we can't, they're none of them, I don't think they're 12 feet. They don't have gravel shoulder. The reason that D here, that one that's been proposed is not non-conforming is because it says used to create a smooth surface for walking, biking, or other recreational activities. If you go to the trail east of the town center, it's already growing in. I mean, it's not a walkable, smooth surface. The gravel shoulders are coming in. It's not going to be maintained. So actually, I think everything is conforming. I still like the Parks and Recreation Commission, but I think this is very close too. So I support Commissioner Gibson's motion to adopt number 1.
I think we're currently debating the amendment to the motion.
Yes,
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
To have the exception.
All right. Anything further? Please call the roll on the motion to amend the motion.
just for clarification, I would like Commissioner Akey's to restate what item C was.
Item C was exceptions And Aubrey Davis Park would be listed as an exception. And I think maybe Allison can help me out with the language here, but I think it would be something like Aubrey Davis Park is exempt from these provisions and design standards are per WashDOT or something like that. Allison, can you make that less words?
You really want to put WashDOT in there?
They own the property. And they forced us to use their standards anyhow.
No, they didn't. They left it up to us on the trail.
I'm good. Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe this is sufficient.
Yeah. Good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think WashDOT standards apply to WashDOT owned land already. We wouldn't necessarily need to call that out in the code.
It was more like an explanatory to
Mhm.
the PRC. Maybe that could be a comment or, I don't know. So they're not like, why wouldn't you have any rules on Aubrey?
Does it, it's not exactly clear, right? Whether the statute that says surplus or air lease property is governed by the local zoning, right? I mean, that's a question. We don't know whether it applies to existing leases or only new leases, but
I see
We
Kim.
know, we do know it does not apply to existing leases. It will apply to the renewal of the leases.
okay. All right, please call the vote.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Nay.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Nay.
Commissioner Accuse.
Aye.
Motion fails. So the
Okay.
vote was split.
Shall we now vote on Commissioner Gibson's motion to adopt section D1? Please call the vote.
Commissioner Accuse. Commissioner
Nay.
Accuse, thank you. Nay. Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Perez.
Nay.
Motion fails.
All right.
So just a clarification where that puts us. What was the original language that this would default to since that failed?
Just the first sentence.
I think it's the PRC language.
Yeah.
So
I am
is that
trying to
just
remember the exact
removing
wording,
and-
but I think it said
Trails shall not exceed 12
12
feet in
feet.
width.
Yeah.
It's just a,
All right.
It leaves some room for interpretation.
Okay.
Okay, let's see, moving on. We get to section G, impervious surface.
We haven't done the second part of the motion because Vice Chair Gibson only did item 1.
Okay, did you want to bring a motion then? To adopt section 2?
It's currently in conflict with section 1 now, so I think it would have to be something like
I don't think it's in conflict. I mean, the staff wrote 1 and 2. It's
but
just.
they have to go together. It's in conflict because if you have to have a maximum width of 10 feet. And then you have to have shoulders of at least 2 feet, that's on both sides, that's 14 feet.
Right.
So
But one of the concerns I have is neither trail or shared use trail is defined in the definitions. So, I mean, I just personally really don't want to get into language that requires a certain width. There's so many trails. That's my feeling.
To clarify, the word trails is defined in the code, and so the shared use term would default to the dictionary definition. I haven't looked that up, but I assume that would be something along the line of 2 or more uses.
Well, I mean, every trail on Mercer Island, I see bicyclists and people using scooters and all the trails. I mean, I'd like to stay away from Webster's, but do you want to bring a motion to adopt section 2?
I think section 2 is in conflict with section 1 as written. So I guess my question to staff is to deal with commuter route bicycle safety through Aubrey Davis Park, would we need an exemption here or not? Because as written, it does not comply with WashDOT standards in Aubrey Davis Park. Because that is a shared use trail and there are sections that are greater than 12 feet. So if we wanted to do any renovation or replacement as is, we would have to make those trails smaller, which would not be safe for pedestrians or cyclists.
I don't think there's any greater than 12 feet. of paved
Person's
width.
saying they're measured and they're greater than 12 feet.
Not the paved part. When you add the gravel shoulders east, he's talking about the bathroom where they put in the gathering area by the bathroom. I mean, that's not a trail, that's the gathering area.
Does the city define that as a trail? And additionally, the area under the overpass, is that defined as a trail? I mean,
Do you
We'd have
a
to
motion?
ask our park staff to provide more detail on that. I don't think either of us really knows the exact specifications of the trails in Aubrey Davis to that level of detail.
Okay, seeing no motion, let's move on to section G, impervious surface. This is staff's proposed motion to add references to the pros plan and CIP. Anyone want to make a motion on that or think it's necessary?
yeah, I think there's a couple other items that are references that were missed above. So could we just do a blanket motion to adopt all staff recommendations about recommendations to other planning, references to other planning documents? Or do we need to call them out each specifically? Could we say amend to include all staff recommendations to references to other city documents as written in this draft? And I'm thinking if we go back up to C8, their chapter 1907 MICC, is that just a hyperlink or is that a new reference?
Which section? C, so in signs and kiosks is what you're talking about?
Use is permitted. C
That's just a hyperlink.
8, and so those are just hyperlinks. Are there other places where staff is citing other planning documents, or do we just do it here?
I mean, the only revisions that we're proposing for the impervious surface standard are just to add not pros plan, but let me scroll it down to it.
Pros plan and CIP.
Okay, the clarification works. I just didn't know those ones are hyperlinked because they're the same color as the edits.
Sorry for the confusion.
Okay, so motion to accept staff recommendation to add reference to pros plan and CIP.
Second.
Any
Just have
discussion?
Can we have that typed out, just so I understand kind of what?
The text up there worked perfectly. So accept staff recommendation to add reference to pros plan and CIP is what I heard.
Yes.
Is that accurate, Commissioner Hughes?
Correct.
I'm sorry.
He was saying to see it in line.
And the thinking there's that those have both been approved by council.
Okay. Do we have a second? You seconded it, right? So we have a motion by
second.
Commissioner Hughes to add staff's recommendation language such as the pros plan and capital improvement program, and it was seconded by Commissioner Press. I guess my question is, I guess we could put it in, but do you need it? Or do you just want to leave a larger blanket language that says a planning document that includes a public process and a city council approval? That's pretty broad. I mean, it's comp plan, it's just about everything. And so do we need to add, if we add the pros plan and the capital improvement program, does that sound like we're leaving others out? I guess that would be my question.
I don't think it does with the wording Carson proposed, the such as is broad and not exclusive.
All right, any further discussion? Commissioner Perez, you look like you have a thought. No. Commissioner Gibson, no, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, who made the second?
Perez?
Thank you. Okay, Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
All right, now we're moving to staff's recommended amendment in section G to add following uses as exempt from the impervious surface. To add exemption for temporary uses / structures. Do I have a motion for that?
Prior to making a motion, can I get clarification from staff? Is that meant like if somebody's, this is a weird example, but say somebody's having a wedding in a park, would this mean that if their dance floor is an impervious surface, it would be exempt? Like is a stage for
Not
a
sure
concert
that's
venue an
something like
impervious
that.
surface?
I'm not sure if that's something like that would be an impervious, like, it's a gray area. I'm not sure, if a temporary covering like that should be considered impervious surface or not, but it maybe could be. It is a hard surface covering.
Because I'm thinking I want to propose a motion if things like temporary stages or dance floors cannot be. We have a lot of events that have those types of features.
I don't think that would be impervious surface. So, but is there a motion to adopt
Well,
that?
I'm trying to get, I don't want to make I want to make a motion if those are considered impervious surfaces, but if they're not, then I don't want to make a motion. So I need clarification from staff or the city attorney.
I'm gonna try and find the definition of impervious surface for you quickly.
Thank you.
We might be able to resolve that by saying permanent. Permanent impervious, no new.
You're the builder.
Do you have a sense of whether,
I haven't built a lot of temporary things.
yeah.
Um,
Is
But I
that-
guess if you had to build the tennis bubble actually has like a impervious surface that stays there permanently. So like there would be a permanent permit to
Mm.
construct that and then a temporary permit for the actual above grade. So there'd actually be two permits for the two.
It's almost like temporary and impervious surface are,
Mutually exclusive?
yeah.
That's
Pretty-
what, yeah. So I don't think,
Sorry, I did find the definition. Just says includes without limitation the following buildings. It does not say temporary or permanent. Footprint of the building and structures, including all eaves. Vehicular uses like driveways, those wouldn't be temporary. Sidewalks wouldn't be temporary. Recreational facilities.
Footprint of a structure, I think you said.
Yeah,
I think a stage or a dance floor would count as a structure.
Okay, then I'd like to propose a motion to add an exemption for temporary structures to item 1.
Second.
All right, there's a motion by Commissioner Hughes to add exemption for temporary uses structures to section G1, impervious surface. It's seconded by Chair Gibson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Nay.
Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
Next, we have the section H lighting, which is a little complex. We have general requirements. I'm trying to make sure that I understand what we're being asked to adopt. Is it section 3 or is it the language in section 1, general requirements, section 2, exemptions, that language, and then
Yeah.
section 3, A, B, C, D, E?
So everything that's read in this section is new text. The reason, so the two separate lighting sections that were more or less the same that we were talking about at the last meeting, I think those were put in between sections 1 and 2. And so we moved the exemptions up that apply to the general requirements. And so we're now calling this new text here. This section is general requirements. There's also some more text down here about crime prevention through environmental design principles. And then similarly, we've added another title here, specified rather than just referring to this requirement, the exemptions in H1 or requirements in subsection H1, and then this 200 lumens specifying per fixture down here.
So the blue language is new, right?
It shows up as red on my document on screen.
Oh, okay. We
it's the
have
same.
so our blue is their red. Okay, so I know that you're kind of the expert on it and your amendment, so.
But myself and Commissioner Nazim. So can I make a motion to accept section H of PCB 2511 1, 2, and 3 as noted by staff?
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Perez to adopt staff's proposed amendments for section H 1, 2, and 3, seconded by Commissioner Hughes. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you.
The next one I'm moving towards is section J, short line recreation.
I withdraw that proposed amendment.
All right. So it'll go back. I guess that will just go away. Turning now to the definitions. It looks like the next one is recreational facilities, whether to add boat houses as a part of the definition. And then we also have staff's recommended alternative language. This is yours, Commissioner Hughes.
I have a clarifying question for staff before proposing a motion. I think the language I was looking for last time was shell house. And Shell House is written in the Luther Burbank Park Master Plan. So would it be acceptable to staff or in any conflict to say Piers Shell House? Do we say Shell Houses even though there's only one proposed?
I think it would be plural would follow the context of the rest of this section. All of the terms are plural.
Okay.
And I think shell houses is fine. It's more specific than what I'd suggested, but that's okay.
Okay, I'd like to propose a motion to amend the definition of recreational facilities to include the term shell houses after piers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Just one moment, Chair, while I catch up with where we're plugging this in. After Pierce, okay. And it was made, excuse me, by Commissioner Hughes, and who seconded it?
Commissioner
Perez.
Perez.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye. Moving now to the next section, recreational uses. This is your amendment. Can you propose it or discuss it?
I think this is this a staff suggestion based on adding shell houses?
This was my suggestion just based on your prior intent of trying to kind of link these shoreline recreational uses in and give them a little more emphasis. This just seemed like a way that that could be done pretty simply.
Okay, I'd like to propose a motion to amend the definition for recreational uses to include after play equipment, water-based recreation. Or maybe, sorry, can it be water dependent recreation? I think that's more common term.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Is it too late for me to ask a quick question?
No, sorry.
So, just looking for, water dependent. Seems like it may be very, very specific as opposed to water based. Somehow, like a land-based rowing device, is that water dependent? Or not? Or, yeah, but I'll defer.
Well, the water dependent is.
That's
is-
exercise equipment and that's already included.
Okay,
Water dependent is a specific.
Thank you.
Term.
It is,
And they
okay.
use, they used it on the Luther Burbank waterfront remodel they're doing, you're developing your waterfront for waterfront dependent uses.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
So, anything else? Please call the roll.
Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
We are now to proposed amendment for Shoreline Park.
I withdraw the proposed amendment.
That is withdrawn. And that takes us to the end.
Now we just need a motion to adopt everything as amended.
Vice Chair?
Isn't
Actually, excuse
motion's
me.
already on the
We haven't
table?
There's
done
already a
zoning
motion
action.
on the table.
Yeah.
So if you adopt the main motion as amended, that's all we're doing, and that's what my minutes will state.
All right.
Point of order, do we need to take care of the comments AV 9 and AV 10?
Those are the additional recommendations.
No, they're amending the zoning map, or is that a different
Oh.
item entirely?
I think we already discussed those at the last meeting. Did we
Okay.
not?
Okay, I guess we have it. Would you please call the roll to adopt the amendment as amended?
Yes. Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that takes us to the end of the matters before us. Anything from staff or?
There
report?
was one remaining issue, which was the additional recommendations that were discussed at the last meeting but not voted on. There's two ideas. One is writing a letter to WashDOT regarding Aubrey Davis Park. And the second was the process for approving our institutions in parks and including the Parks and Recreation Commission in that process.
Would you like a motion for us?
Yeah, we would need a motion and a vote regarding whether the planning commission would like to include those recommendations as a part of your recommendation to city council.
All right, we'll do them separately. I'll make a motion that the planning commission, as part of its recommendation to the council, request that council write to WashDOT explaining the different uses and regulatory limits in the PI zone and new park zone, and whether WashDOT has any objections to Aubrey Davis Park being placed into the park zone. Anybody got a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Chair Thompson, excuse me.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Perez,
Nay.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
Would you like to maybe do the next motion? About, or you, how about you on the arts, since you were on the Arts Council?
I can take a swing at it. I'd like to move that we ask, sorry, before I go into this, can you repeat what?
How about there's a motion that we join the Parks and Recreation Commission recommendation to the council to explore a process between the Arts Council and the Parks and Recreation Commission on approving art in the parks.
Right, there's an existing recommendation from the Parks Commission and, okay. So I move that the Planning Commission also endorse the Parks recommendation to engage with the Arts Council for future art installations within the park zone.
Seconded. Any discussion?
Yes. I think that the Arts Council and the Parks Commission are two very different bodies, and people are selected for those bodies based on their experience. And I do not think the Parks Commission is necessarily qualified possibly to judge whether art has value in our parks or not. That's an art decision, in my opinion, not a parks decision.
I would just comment, I think I agree with you on that, but I see the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I think Commissioner Perez spoke to this last time. They would have a second set of eyes as to the size and scale and the location. I know almost everybody on the Parks and Recreation Commission. I don't see them intervening on what is art or worthy art, but I like them to be a decision maker on when it comes to scale and size and location. So, I mean, I'm just asking the council, this is just to ask the council to see if they can come up with some joint process where the two work together. on locating art in the park. Because, I'll tell you myself, just aside, I know it's late, I would like to see more of our art in our town center. I mean, I think probably the best and most dramatic art piece is the one that's, near the old Tully's, up on the hill. And we have the sculpture garden, and I do like that because you can actually, walk and see different sculptures, but I would sure love to see some more dramatic pieces in our town center, especially if they were lit up at night. That's my own personal feeling. Anything else, or should we call the roll? Please call the roll.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Nay.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
I believe that brings us to the end of the evening. Is there a staff report or anything you want to update us on?
I'll just briefly say that our next meeting is planned for July 23rd, and we'll be bringing back the temporary uses and structures draft for your review at that meeting.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
And thanks again. I was really worried about wading through that. So I really think you did a great job. I thought that the Parks and Recreation Commission did an outstanding job on their draft that they brought to us. So, I mean, man, that makes it a lot easier. Well, that concluding business, the meeting is concluded at 9:50.